domestic church with us, and this is 2 of the 5 bells, and they don't ring during the Angelus at the right time. Just sometimes that makes sense, right? If you have children, you know the bells ring at different times. But yes, we're from Cajun country. It's neat being here. I realized I was seeing the names. I guess in some ways my family's probably some of y'all are French Canadian, maybe some, or a few. So I guess my family's a French Canadian in some ways as well, because my mother, both my mom and my dad were Acadian, Acadian, so I grew up in a French-speaking culture and area, and it means a lot to me. In fact, we were in Nova Scotia last year, seeing where my family came from, and we were married in the church that was sort of the site of the where the Acadians arrived in Louisiana after the deportation. That Henry Longfellow's poem Evangelization was written. So anyway, y'all might get some of these things, but we say y'all occasionally. That's okay. And but we're still American. We vote. I was thinking also on Saturday we're headed up from here to Quebec. My father's family lived there for a while after the deportation, and before they went to New Orleans, and where we live in Lafayette. And we're headed up there on Saturday to provide the first ever French translation and training in Witness to Love, which is unique. And some of you all from maybe whose families are from Quebec, you know the church has obviously just struggled there a lot. I grew up with a lot of priests and religious from Quebec, older when I was a kid, but I remember hearing stories, pray for Quebec. And so when Witness to Love was started taking off, I told Mary Rose, wouldn't it be wonderful one day we could kind of give back what we discovered, and just to help, because what we discovered in Louisiana, which we'll share with you today, is now spread throughout 75 dioceses in the U.S. and Canada, and we're seeing a great sort of energy and renewal of parish life and of communities, and particularly through the strengthening of marriage, which obviously is at the core of a functioning society, right? I mean, a community's health is determined a lot by the health of marriages. So anyway, just a little background about us. Mary is from Virginia. And we met, I was in the DC area wandering around trying to figure out what I was doing, probably looking like a millennial. Just talk about millennials a lot because we work so much with them and we're trying to get them interested and come back to the church. But she was very patient with me and did several 30-day novenas to St. Joseph, probably a year's worth. So I could figure things out. And then after my 7-day novena to St. Joseph, we decided to get married. Anyway, this is Mael, and we have an older daughter who's almost 10 named Zaylee, a little boy who's 8 named Andre, after brother Andre, a little girl named Melody who turned 6 today. She's going to have a lot of ice cream this evening and cupcakes, I'm sure. And then Mael, Therese, and then Loic, who's 10 weeks here, sleeping. So, we fait au dos maintenant. Okay. All right. So, we're going to let Mary Rose come up and I'll maybe put this on.
I'm originally from Virginia, and I worked for the Diocese of Arlington for 3 years in their Family Life Office, and then the Diocese of Lafayette, Louisiana for 3 years in their Family Life Office. And in both locations worked on kind of the renewal of the marriage prep policy and retreats and premarital inventories and training NFB instructors. And so, and then I went to Christendom College, which is a small college in Virginia, and I'm one of 8 kids. And I also worked for 5 years at a small country parish, two parishes kind of in a cluster in Louisiana, so for 5 years. And so this whole story and this whole methodology and this whole everything is from all that time that I worked at the diocese and at the parish. And then when Ryan and I got married, we continued to volunteer to speak at the diocesan conferences and do trainings. And so we've been, I would say, for a little over 12 years now, immersed in sort of marriage prep and family life. And so we travel a lot, as you can probably imagine, in being in 75 dioceses. And so we get to meet awesome people like you all over the country or all over the world. And we haven't even gotten started, but I can tell already y'all are a very special group of people here today. And so we're really looking forward to this. Y'all are smiling.
You were early?
You got here early. Those are all really good signs. So we're going to have a great day today. So we're really looking forward to this. And do you want me to start with the So we were thinking about what to call this presentation, and normally we give, I guess a little disclaimer here. Normally when we come in, we're doing either what we're doing right now, sort of a evangelization presentation, how to use marriage formation for evangelization, or we're just giving a straight on witness to love training. The regular witness to love training is 6 hours long, and the morning is focused on sort of everything we're talking about today, evangelization, sort of the nuts and bolts of marriage formation. And then the afternoon is basically how to do it with the witness to love materials. So today, this presentation that you've come for is sort of marriage formation and evangelization, the sort of cutting edge resources. But then for those who want to stay, probably from 1:30 to 2-ish, somewhere in there, if you decide, you know what, I like this, I want to do this at my parish, I want to be trained, those people can stay in about basically another 30 minutes where we'll basically kind of walk you through the resources that we have, and we have online training as well, and videos that you can do. So that's a great way to kind of get into it. But we were talking about what to call this. We said, we don't want to say, hey, this is how you use marriage prep to evangelize, because that sounds a little meh, right? But in a sense, we are taking the opportunity where couples are, the declining number who are coming to the church to get married in the church. And it is a greatly declining number. Since 1990, the number of sacramental marriages has dropped by 50%. And so those few couples who are still coming, and it's dropping drastically every year. I mean, it's just like a drop-off. Baptism rates are dropping, confirmation, all those other ones are dropping slowly, but the marriage one is just gone.
I think it was 1990, it was 300,000 marriages in the United States, and then 15 years later, that was 2005.
I think it was close to 500,000 in 1990, and then close to 250,000 this past year. So that's a big drop. So we decided, you can talk about the Ignites.
Yeah, we're working with this group in Quebec, and last night we were kind of discerning and praying about today, and we had one of our kind of good friends who's a priest. We were visiting with him, and we were trying to get the right term. The term we were thinking, okay, when marriage formation is evangelization, we know that. But we
it
should be. And then obviously just coming from Pentecost, we just sort of realized how marriage formation can ignite, right? How it can inspire and can get us excited and make us smile and bring sort of energy to the parish. And that's the experience that we started to have 8 years ago now in this process we discovered.
So the ignites so the title of today's talk is When Marriage Formation Ignites Evangelization. So there should be a spark, something should happen. Now, prior to 8 years ago, when we sort of discovered this methodology and this process of evangelization through marriage formation, it wasn't so much fun. There weren't so many sparks, and it definitely wasn't igniting much. It was, I would say, less than 10%. It was more like 5% of couples who would go through marriage prep would be like, wow, this changed my life, I can live this, I can do this, I love it, thank you. That doesn't happen too often. And usually the couples who are like that, they were already like that coming into the process, and the process was kind of the icing on the cake. So we're going to talk about how do you ignite evangelization and really the gifts of the Holy Spirit in someone who doesn't want to get married in the church, except for, well, grandma won't come to the wedding or pay for it if I'm not married in the church. How do you ignite evangelization in nuns, not NUNs, not like Sister but those with no religious affiliation. We have used this process with atheists, with Hindus, with Muslims, Buddhists, Baptists, and they love this process. And many of them do become Catholic. Now, it's not out to proselytize, it's out to evangelize. So, let's see, it's not going on. So, what are some of the signs that marriage formation is igniting this evangelization that we're talking about? So, again, you know when you're working with a couple, there's that moment of, wow, this couple, something happened in them. Something's different. I'm enjoying working with this couple. I'm seeing fruit. So what are those key fruits? They've been formed in virtue. Okay, your virtue doesn't happen overnight, right? That's a process for all of us. We're all still working on it. But to see an engaged couple say, you know what, We've struggled with pornography. We've struggled with, fill in the blank, all these different things, anger, disrespect, and we're growing. We're doing better. Okay, that's a sign that this process is bearing fruit in their lives. It builds community through friendship. So you see that they're not isolated, because remember that's like one of the number one challenges, not just in the church, but in society today, that people are isolated. So seeing them building community, connecting to the church, which is really the ultimate community that they should have. So building that friendship. Also increasing mass attendance so that they're going to church. Maybe they weren't going at all, maybe they were going once a month, but now they're going every Sunday. Okay? And for families, especially with young kids, that's a big commitment, because sometimes you get the stink eye when you're in church with kids, right? And so for these young couples to be going to church and bringing their children. And then also lowering the divorce rate. So we don't just want them going to church. We don't just want them we don't want to just say, oh, they're going to church and using NFP or all these things. We want to say, are they staying married? Okay? Because 23% of Catholic marriages, sacramental marriages, end, or they're divorced or separated.
Mommy!
Yes?
Mommy!
Right here. By 5 years after the wedding day. So that's almost 1 in 4 marriages that you prepare couples for will be divorced within 5 years. Now after 5 years, it just drops. But what are we doing for the first 5 years? If they're not going to church, if they're not in community, if they're not where you can serve them and reach them and they can reach you, then you can't affect sort of the stability of their marriage in those first 5 years when they need it the most. So those are really the key 4 marks, I would say, of are you igniting evangelization in the couples that you're working with?
I think about how important those first 5 years are, as just to have a conversion and to go from a culture that is so isolating today and is so individualistic and doesn't really, how much in our culture really prepares us for a lifelong committed friendship in Christ? It's just not a part of where we are. And we can't say that's going to happen in sort of a couple of lectures filled with a room with people you don't know well, and maybe with the church that you don't trust. And so we're realizing that that 5-year period, in particular the sort of catechumen approach and sort of the mystagogy of the sacrament formation, really focuses on the supporting aspect of living a life of faith. And this is such human stuff, not complicated, right? But I think a lot of us sort of have overlooked that because we felt so sort of needing to present just the right information, but maybe not always at the right time or right context.
And Ryan was mentioning catechumenate and mystagogia, and so I know many of you wear many hats in your parish. So who's here also involved in RCIA as a parish? A number of people. Okay, so about a third of you. So in the RCIA process, there's the catechumenate. They're coming to learn. You expect them to start, many of them, with a blank slate. Not knowing how to do the sign of the cross, not knowing anything. With marriage preparation, and we like to call it marriage formation. In marriage formation, you also, like a catechumenate coming for the first time to learn about Jesus, about God, about the church, you presume they know nothing. Now think about most marriage prep, we don't presume they know nothing. We presume you want a sacrament, you have a basic understanding of what that is, and we're gonna give it to you, and you're gonna check those boxes, and you're gonna do your thing. But Witness to Love really understands it's a catechumenate approach to marriage preparation, meaning they are starting from pretty much zero. Many of them are starting below zero, right? Not only do they know nothing, they have some baggage and some wounds and some healing and some misunderstanding. So, and then the mystagogia, meaning after the wedding day, we don't just drop one, hey, you're married, boom, done. Mystagogia is the unpacking of the sacrament, the ability to live it out. So that's what couples need for the first 5 years. So when Ryan is saying catechumenate and mystagogia, we're basically saying, just like an RCIA candidate, maybe that's unbaptized, doesn't know anything about the church, it's similar today with marriage preparation, that maybe the girl was a cradle Catholic and stopped going to church when she received her confirmation, and then the guy, maybe he's not even baptized, not even Christian. You see, that's who we're working with.
Yeah. So this little guy, if you ever had a baby, that he's 10 weeks old, And he was born 4 pounds 7 ounces.
5 pounds.
Okay, but it has doubled. It's like almost 12 pounds.
He is 12 pounds.
You know, so we were at Catholic TV in Boston the other day, and it was funny. We were getting ready to do this taping, and he's in a
It was
baby
live.
seat. It was live, and so they had to kind of pause it and reset things really quick. And the guy, it was the best line ever. He must have been around children a lot. He says, "Sounds like the baby needs some groceries." That's great. So anyway, just a little, as you're putting these things together, you might be wondering, why is this important to you two, that you would, want to sort of, bring your family around and travel so many different places. So we both come from backgrounds, obviously, where our parents were married. My parents are getting ready to celebrate their 46th anniversary. Mary Rose's parents were divorced, but I came from a background with lots of divorce, and saw the ramifications of that and how that affected just the extended family, and saw my parents go through a deep, profound conversion and stay committed. So we got to see a lot of the good, the bad, and the ugly with regards to marriage, but we see how much effort and work it is, and how marriage can be used, obviously, as a sort of a big healing process. But just to continue along, where is now the current state of marriage prep? Those 4 indicators earlier that we were saying were those are the things that we would say are indicators that marriage prep is a success. But for the most part, this is really the current state of marriage prep. And it's sort of in our background, we were presenters, voluntold by this great priest who's the director of the Family Life Office in our diocese. We were presenting in this auditorium once a month, around 70 couples. Still a lot of marriages in the diocese that we live in, which is great. But they weren't really going to church. They weren't really going to Mass. But we were presenting, and we were a team of 7 other people that we were good friends with. We spent a lot of time with these people. They're very faithful, and they sacrificed just as much as we were. But after those big weekends where we were presenting, we were kind of coming back to these same questions. Where were these couples that we had prepared for marriage? What was our relationship dynamic with these couples? And how would we even know that they were having problems? We saw this particularly when we had our second child, and we stopped presenting doing the diocesan conferences, and we started volunteering more at our parish. And we realized how much can get really done at a parish level. But when we got to the parish, there were some key couples that we were looking for from that parish that had gone to the diocesan trainings, and they weren't coming to Mass. And these were couples that had shared with us like good insights from the presentations. And we know they had actually gone to adoration at some point, but they just weren't. And there was one couple that stood out a lot. And I remember, and I'm sure many of you have presented, when you had the podium, and after these talks, a couple will come up to you at the end of the day, and you've been talking for quite a while, and they, and you got to know them, and you thought, wow, they had a really good experience. Now, 68 other couples have already left, but you have 2 couples who are standing around the podium for half an hour, and you think the day was a great success, right? Because that's all you know, and you leave feeling good, and it's like, we had a lot of good fluffy feelings, but when you walk out and you see someone left a certificate in the last pew that they were supposed to bring to their parish from the day, it's a little bit sobering as to what really happened. Does that make sense to you? It doesn't mean, like, everybody's in a different place, not being judgmental, there's no condemnation in Christ, but it was sort of a sobering reality for us that, wow, we're spending a lot of time doing things, and we're expecting everybody else on the team to do the same thing, and the outcomes are so poor. So I just want you to think about this. So this one couple that I was referring to, when we got to the parish, and we were looking around for them, and we couldn't find them, we finally found a way to connect with the young lady who got married, Laura. And when we connected with Laura through her sister, who sang in the choir, great family, this couple, great families, that church-going families. This was 7 months after the wedding. That couple was already divorced. Oh. And that was so sobering. Now, it's shocking, but I know when we know people in many different vocations that you think these people should never be leaving their vocation. And all of a sudden, they do. And so we finally made our way to connect with Laura. We couldn't find her husband, you know, they were now separated. And we asked Laura, you know, well, Mary Rose initiated the conversation. You know, she asked Laura, you know, what happened? And, you know, she said, you know, why didn't you reach out to us? And her first thing was, she said, you know, Mary Rose, she said, I didn't reach out to y'all because you were just so different. You know, y'all were really like church-going people, and we admired that and we looked up to that. But honestly, we didn't really, you know, I wouldn't say that we really kind of connected, which was sort of sobering because it was. We realized, wow, we thought we were. I mean, these were one of the two couples that stayed around. And then we said, well, who, you know, why didn't you call the parish? And he said, well, you know, we never really had, the parish wasn't something in our life that we would call when we have problems, right? This is young people. And we said, well, who did you call? And can anybody guess who she called when they needed help in their marriage? Their friends who were divorced, right? Not a surprise. Their friends who were divorced. It's you know, and we're not like naive. I didn't grow up in any bubble. I went to public school my whole life, and you know, one of 4 boys, and ups and downs of marriage and everything. But it was really kind of interesting. And that story though really brought us to a place of either, okay, we didn't tell Father at the time, Father, we think this is not cut out for us. We don't think we're really having a good effect here, and maybe you should have somebody else. It's like, well, who else is going to do it? Was it, you know? And because we were really passionate about marriage, we wanted to. We fell in love with this quote from John Paul II from St. John of the Cross, where it said, you know, love is repaid by love alone, and we really, that was part of our wedding promise, that we would give back the gifts that we had received, our own healing and insights and relationship with the Lord. You know, so Father Michael at the time said, look, he said, let's go pray. So actually, we set up a time to go to adoration, and we prayed. And it was from that, though, we realized that there needed to be a sort of a different way to approach marriage prep. But can you relate to these questions here? And I'm in awe that you all would set it apart this time. I was telling y'all earlier that it's amazing on a weekday, you're here, maybe some of you are part of the parish staff, but that you would see this as a priority, and you would see that this is something that we can do better. It was interesting though. One of the first questions, I think, when we started to reevaluate who these couples were, and maybe you know this from a distance, but it's really important to understand who are these couples and where are they coming from. So I said, you know, to you all earlier, my background was kind of French Canadian, so I think people in my family, and we're in South Louisiana, have been, you know, everybody's been having their kids baptized since like Clovis was converted. But all of a sudden, I have cousins now, and we grew up with my great-grandparents praying the rosary, kneeling down. I mean, all my extended cousins. I mean, it's just, they're not even baptizing their kids now. Not shocking. And, you know, it's sort of, and I think maybe in the 90s or so, we were just sort of like frustrated. Why is this so? But they moved away from the church. Now, they come for a funeral or a wedding, and, you know, those types of things. But if the church is not really part of their life, they're not thinking about, they're also coming from these backgrounds, also a lot of pain and isolation and divorce. When we started, at the beginning of Witness to Love, we started on this process, we started really interviewing couples and asking them, basically, when they were starting this kind of a marriage prep, we started focusing on it at the parish, we said, I want to ask you a question. Is there a couple, like, for example, did you look up to your parents' own marriage? And we had almost 400 couples that were interviewed over several years. And I think we can say that in those first initial interviews, there were only around 7 individuals, not 7 couples, 7 individuals that said that they would be happy to have a marriage like their parents. Wow. So this is where they're coming from. And this is not, I don't live in this sort of isolated, these are all people who are formed by Facebook, the media culture, you know, the current school system. I mean, just, it's the culture, there's one culture in the United States now, and everybody, all the young people are getting formed in it. It doesn't really matter what neighborhood you live in anymore in some ways. But they're coming from this, and they're isolated. They don't have an experience of kind of meals together. They don't have an experience of sort of sharing. Not all of them, obviously, but for some reason, though, they are still, they get to the church. Now, this is these first-time married Catholics. We'll talk about, you know, couples in civil unions a little bit later, but these first-time married Catholics, and that's the number that's dropping a lot, they still get to the church, maybe because somebody's paying for it, maybe because they like it, maybe because of the aisle or something, but they're still coming to the church.
And this is the kind of part we usually kind of share. You know, we had been doing marriage prep ministry for so long that, especially, you know, I having had worked with the Diocese of Arlington, the Diocese of Lafayette, I thought when I got to the parish, like working at the parish, first of all, I thought I knew everything, because I worked at the diocese, but, and they were both really great dioceses, but it's just a very different dynamic when you have a room full of couples, and you maybe get through to a few, and then you go to the parish and you just realize, well, that was kind of a waste of my time because they're not at church and they're divorced, so I don't feel like I made a difference. It was definitely dark to see it that way, but also realized it's easy but also impossible to love a group of 70 couples from a podium that you're never going to see again. You know, you can be nice to them, you can put on your best, you can be, you know, the best that you can, you know, present, but it's not reality. It's not your reality and it's not their reality. What they really need is someone to be there, to be real, and to be with them in the long haul. And so, also realized in working with these couples that,
That's okay, we just kind of shift around a little bit. It's a rainy day on.
There's a noonie right there too. But also realized that, that I didn't love the couples that we worked with. I didn't even like them. And again, it's easy to be nice from behind a podium, but when they're sitting on your sofa and they're in your living room and they're late and the mother of the bride is calling you and they are complaining about the cost of the NFP class and they're trying to get out of things and they wait until a month before the wedding to do something, or they don't return your phone calls, you start to really not care for them too much. And I was really at the point of really not caring for them too much. And this was about 7 years into marriage ministry. And Ryan, what's this, can't connect with iCloud, I'll say later. See that works. In particular, what kind of, we usually share during these trainings is to think about the couples you work with. I'm sure you're probably in a similar experience where I was saying, I really don't care for these couples too much. I remember our pastor, Father Michael, saying, I had left working at the diocese. I was done working with couples. I didn't want anything to do with them anymore. And our son was about a little bit younger than Loic. And there was a knock on the door, and Father Michael had a bottle of wine. It was about 8:30 at night, and he said, "Hey, I want to talk to you about helping with marriage prep at the parish." Close that door. And he's like, no, you know, I brought wine. Let's talk. And so he started off the sort of, can you work at the parish with, hey, I'd rather do 10 funerals than a wedding. I said, I've heard that before. He said, no. He said, seriously? He said, because when I bury someone, I don't expect to see them in church. He said, but when I do a wedding, he said, every single time, I think maybe this one I'll get through to them. Maybe this one will join the parish. Maybe this one will be that, you know, great young couple that helps with CCD and like, I just keep thinking maybe this couple I'll get through to them. He said, and he said it was less than 1 in 10. And he said, and they're already the people that were great anyway. And he said, they're never my parishioners anyway. You know, so it was just, and I said, okay, you know, we'll do something. And as Ryan shared with you, we discovered that couples we'd worked with were already divorced and from working at the diocese. And so it was a kind of a dark place. And so not only did I not like the couples, I was also getting disillusioned. You know, like, not only do I not like them, this is not even working, so why bother? And Ryan, did you show the slide of what we required in the past yet? Okay. So,
the clicker?
Oh, the clicker, sorry. So at that parish, when I got to the parish, what Father Michael was doing at the time, and he was doing more than anyone else in the diocese. And so to think about what you require at your parish, We were having 3 meetings with Father or Deacon, so the sort of paperwork meeting at the beginning, the hey, you should abstain meeting, and then the hey, what's the wedding going to be like meeting, right? Then also 1 or 2 meetings to go over a prepare or a focus, which is a premarital inventory. Also 6 meetings with a trained, assigned, expert mentor couple. So they were assigned to them, they didn't know this couple. And that's what Ryan was referencing in the story where they didn't go to their mentor for help. 3 or 4 mandatory NFP classes, so depending on the method, either 3 or 4. And then 2 days of diocese and marriage prep. So we were doing God's plan for a joyful marriage and living God's plan for joyful marriage. So they had to go to 2 days. So they were doing all of that. But out of every 17 couples who were married in 2011, 4 were divorced by 5 years after the wedding day, even though they did all of that. It was actually in 4 years, actually. It was less than 5. The divorce rate at our parish was 23%. The national average is 25%. Now, at the time, we didn't know what the national average divorce rate for Catholics was, but in working with the Austin Institute, we found out that the divorce rate at 5 years after the wedding day for Catholics and sacramental marriages was 23%. Exactly what we had at the parish. So that divorce rate, it's amazing. Like, it was exactly the same. And so we were disillusioned because we were requiring so much. But now in retrospect, what was happening was it doesn't matter how much you require, it doesn't change the divorce rate if they're not going to church, if they're not praying together, if they're not part of the church community. So remember those 4 marks that we were talking about in the beginning. If they're still addicted to pornography, all those things, if those things are still in place, you're not going to change the divorce rate by requiring all of these things. And think about it. This, I would say, gauntlet of marriage prep that we were putting these couples through, the couples we were putting through it, they were, for the most part, cohabitating or sexually active, pornography addicted to some degree, one or both of them. They had affairs even during their courtship, during their dating, during their engagement. It was just, they had kids already, some of them. If you think about all the wounds that they had, and we were putting them through this process, they don't know any of these people. They could go through this whole process without ever going to Mass at the parish. They could go through this whole process and barely feel connected to any sense of community. Do you see kind of what's going on here? But we just thought the more we require, the better it is going to be for them. And all these were super awesome things. Father Michael's a very evangelical, amazing priest. He's adjunct faculty at the Institute for Priestly Formation. He's a very dynamic priest and pastor and easy to talk to, but it doesn't really make a difference if people aren't connecting to the parish community because Father, you get moved. Then what? You might get moved 3 hours away. So just to think about that, what's in place. So, hold on. So you can't read all this, but we do have online, and I'll reference some of this, that we have online this that you can look at. It's called the Case for Support, and the cover of it online looks like this.
Mommy.
But,
Mommy,
yes.
no one knew that too.
Okay, go walk on the bunny trail with Dad. Bunny trail's right there. Okay, in a minute. I'm coming in 1 minute. I'll hold you until we hop on the bunny trail. Hold on. So
2-year-olds know how to get what they want. So they
okay, Daddy's fixing it. Go to Dad. Our kids never get to watch shows, so this is supposed to be magic, but she's not as connected or interested as other kids. So the journey through traditional marriage prep. So just some key things to go over right here. So that sort of marriage prep gauntlet that I just mentioned earlier, where you could still stay disconnected. And remember, these couples are isolated already. So how do we break that and get them into the parish? So traditional journey through marriage preparation it's information driven. So we're giving them the information because we're presuming they want a sacrament. So we're just giving you the information you need to live that out, right? It's a little more intellectual, and it's also delivered by someone they do not know. Okay, and they will probably never see again. Especially if you think about it where it's one of those things where maybe it's like an engage encounter weekend in another diocese, or the bride can only go here because she's traveling, and so they're going separately. Again, think, well, they might even go to different marriage prep conferences altogether. Usually, if mentors are used, and everyone kind of sees mentors as sort of the cherry on the cake, but hard to find, right? Because you're going to burn out all your best couples. If you do use mentors, they're assigned to a couple they do not know. Those mentor couples are usually expected to mentor 4 to 6 couples a year, and there's no way they can sort of humanly keep up a real friendship and relationship with all those couples. Maybe they click with 1 out of 5 couples, and that's great, and that's awesome, and that's beautiful, but what about the other 4 couples? The lack of parish involvement, the majority of couples, they don't trust the church, so they're not going to trust anyone we sort of assign to them or make them talk to. And not only does the traditional marriage prep process not help them get connected to the parish, many of these couples we talked to, they said it actually made them want less to do with the church and less to do with the parish, because the very first meeting was, are you a parishioner? No. Okay, well that's going to be $2,000 instead of $1,500. But if you register now, you can get a discount. Just don't tell Father. You know, these are the conversations they're having. Again, oh, and by the way, you're shacking up, so sorry. You know, we're going to postpone the wedding until we have a conversation about it. So this is, again, somebody who's disconnected and isolated. How can we accomplish all those same things? Have them abstain, have them going to church, have them become giving parishioners without burning the bridge before the wedding? So the lack of parish involvement. The majority of newly married couples feel lost and do not attend Mass regularly. So they kind of might pop into a few different churches because they really want to do it right, but no one ever really welcomes them, they never really get integrated, and then they have their first kid and they give up. Now they might get their kid baptized, now there's another chance, but you see how this is going. So with that, there's a lack of support in the traditional process. They don't have someone to turn to, and they're not going to seek out marriage enrichment if they're not part of the church community to begin with, okay? Because think about how many times we offer marriage enrichment. Hey, couples date night at the parish. Who shows up? The same 10 couples, right? And so how do we get the couples who really need to be there? Again, they're not going to come if they're not already part of the parish. So, and as Ryan said earlier, they don't reach out to us for help. They reach out to their friends who are either in crisis or are already divorced. So the Catholic divorce rate at the 5-year mark is 23% going through the traditional process. And then secular, so just the general American population is, it's like 25.6 or something, basically between 25 and 26%. It's almost the same. There's like a 2.5% difference between couples who go through the gauntlet of marriage prep, and sacramental formation that we currently have versus the general population that does nothing. So think about, and I don't want to be discouraging, but we kind of have to be discouraging first before we get to the good. Think about how much work you put in, how much, we had babysitters and late nights and going to trainings and giving talks, and it was a burnout party. And to have a less than 3% impact. Okay? So that's why we're here, that's why you're here, that's why we're doing things differently. But just to kind of put that in perspective, who's discouraged? All right, who's ready to be encouraged? All right, so you're going to get to hear a very encouraged priest. Hopefully the sound and everything's working here. But here's what we discovered. We discovered, and this is from Familiaris Consortio, paragraph 66. Guess what? John Paul II and everybody back during the first Synod on the Family in the early 80s, they had it all figured out. We just didn't all read it. But this is a quote. This second Synod, basically, the second Synod on the Family almost wouldn't have had to happen if everybody had read and done this one paragraph. It said we need to balance the doctrinal, pedagogical, legal, and medical, i.e. NFP, in marriage privacy in such a way that those preparing for marriage will not only receive an intellectual training, but will also feel a desire to enter actively into the ecclesial community. This is everything we've been talking about. How can marriage preparation be done in such a way that couples going through it feel a desire to enter actively, keyword there, actively as well, okay, into the ecclesial community, i.e., if marriage prep doesn't get your couples integrated into the church, it's been a failure, okay? Because more and more you have just one chance, like Ryan was saying, like his family members, my family members, they might get married in the church, but they don't necessarily have their children baptized in the church. This might be the last real opportunity to encounter these couples. There was a priest in Florida, and we were giving these trainings all over the place, and a lot of people, they had to be there, so they didn't really want to be there. But one priest, he said, wait. He said, I think this is the first time in marriage preparation that my couples will get to meet Jesus. That's the whole point. If they don't meet Jesus through marriage preparation, if they don't have an encounter with Christ, through your witness and through other witnesses in the community, they will not feel a desire to be part of the church community. So Father Bryce Higginbotham, the priest in the video here, he is a priest in the Diocese of Houma-Thibodeau, which is sort of almost as far south in Louisiana as you can get, kind of like in the boot part sticking out of the Gulf. But he was thrown into a huge parish. He was at the cathedral. He had 40 weddings a year, and he was so discouraged. And they had the traditional mentor model where they were assigned, and he was just really floundering. And he reached out to the priest, Father Michael Delcom, who helped us start Witness to Love, and he said, hey, I need the scoop. What are you doing? I want to talk. So they spoke, and Father Bryce Higginbotham got trained, and you'll see, now he's been using it in his parish for probably 1.5 years now, and just to hear him talk, hopefully this works, is so encouraging.
Yo, I love doing weddings, and I love doing marriage prep. And I just like to tell you why. When the wedding day comes, and I'm there in the sanctuary with a couple, I look them in the eye, and I know them. Not only that, but I look them in the eye, and I know that they're ready to get married. They might not have everything figured out. Who does? Now, they might not know everything perfectly. Who does? But they have received their formation, and they are still willing and ready to grow. Now, I love doing weddings because I love seeing that in the couple. And I just want to tell you why. Or I guess I just want to tell you like how that works in my parish, how that's happened. You know, when I first became a priest, I didn't know a whole lot of what to do for marriage prep, and I started meeting with couples, and what I realized very, very, very quickly was that I can't give them the formation that they need by myself. And so I started asking the question, like, what's the best resource to help me? Like, who can best help with getting these people ready for marriage? And I mean, they're coming to the church, and so we have a duty to provide them with some kind of formation. We have a duty to provide them with good formation. We have a duty to provide them with an amount of formation that is greater than I have hours in the day to give to them. So what do we do? So I found Witness to Love. I'd heard about it, and some people said it was good, and so I said, well, hey, let's give it a try. But I've got to tell you, I am no longer worried about any of my couples who are preparing for marriage. We have 21 couples at this moment who are actively in formation for their marriages, who are actively preparing to get married. Most of those, they're young couples that are married for the first time. A couple of those are convalidations. And I'm not worried about anybody slipping through the cracks. Nor am I worried about anybody not getting the formation that they need for lack of time or lack of energy on my part or anything like that. So let me tell you how it works. Let me tell you the system that we developed working with Witness to Love over this past year or so, and just share with you some of the joys and some of the fruits. So the first thing that happens if somebody wants to get married here is that they call and they get a meeting with me. And I sit down with them for about 30 minutes. It doesn't have to be me. I have to train somebody else to do that. But honestly, I really, really like that. Because we do the canonical stuff, and I have to walk them through, like, here's what's going to happen, here's the process. But really, the fun part is the first thing I do is ask them their story. How'd you meet, and what was the story of your engagement? Because, you know, how he popped the question is always an awesome story. But the reason I do that is because I want to meet them. Because I want to get to know them. But after that meeting, I hand them off to people whom I trust, to people who are going to be able to give them better formation than I could. I have a couple who's graciously volunteered to be marriage prep coordinators. I have other couples who've graciously volunteered to be coordinator couples who are all trained in Witness to Love, who are all trained in Prepare and Enrich. And I gotta tell you, when those couples leave my office, and I know that they're going into the hands of these people, these volunteers with whom I work, who've been trained, with whom I have consistent communication, oh man, I can rest. And then the retreat comes like 5 months later, and I get to see them again. And not only do I get to see these couples, but I get to see them with their mentor couples. And y'all, like the joy on their faces, the engaged couple and the mentor couple, as they walk into the parish hall for the retreat or the theology day, it's just awesome to see. So I get to spend a little time with them on that day, and then after that day, I go to their mentor couple's house, and I meet with the four of them, the mentor couple and the engaged couple, and we just get to talk about the sacrament of marriage. I get to hear stories about their walk together. I always ask, or almost always, hey, why'd you choose them as your mentor couple? And that's always a good story, and always leads to really fruitful discussion and fruitful dialogue about, hey, here's what we want our marriage to look like, and here's how these people image God to us, and it's awesome. And then of course, after that is the wedding. I've got to tell you all, like I said, I love doing weddings, because when the engaged couple and I are up in the sanctuary, like I look them in the eyes, and I know them. When the engaged couple is up there in the sanctuary, and so am I look them in the eyes. I know that they're prepared. I know that they still want to grow, which is key. And I know that they have people in my parish who are older than them, who are more experienced than them, and who are willing to walk with them. That's why I love marriage prep, and that's why I love weddings, because it's growing my parish, and because collaborating with all these volunteers, collaborating with the great materials from Witness to Love, I am better able to father my people than I could by myself. I am better able to be a father to my people. I'm better able to know my people than I would be by myself.
Isn't that a great increase? So we get to work with, over 400 parishes around the U.S. and Canada where, he did not start off that happy about marriage prep, let me tell you right now. It was a whole other story. But you can see what's possible. And something he referenced in there, and we'll be talking a little bit more about. So remember when I was talking about the traditional marriage preparation process, remember I said that we had assigned expert mentor couples. And Ryan mentioned, that we had this holy hour when we really just realized how disillusioned the whole process was. And what we said to Father Michael after that holy hour was, he said, Father, this is the thing. The couples don't trust you or us or those mentors we're assigning. We need to bring someone into this process that they do trust. Because without that bridge, we can't do anything. It's just not affecting anything. And Father said, that's a little scary. Like, who are they going to bring? What are they going to do? And we said, well, you know what? What we're doing isn't doing anything, even though we're doing as much as you can canonically require, right? Because there's a certain point where they say there's a canonical impediment, right? You're requiring more of a couple than the average couple is going to do, therefore they won't get a sacramental marriage, right? So that's what we want to avoid. So we couldn't require any more, but we could tweak something. And what we discerned is that they, and this is what we're saying today. So in January 2012, we changed one thing. We did everything else. We still did the NFP, the retreats, everything. But we changed one thing. Instead of assigning a mentor couple, engaged couples were asked to choose a married couple whom they trusted and admired to accompany them before and after the wedding day. And that was a scary sort of decision to allow them to choose a mentor, because again, we were like, oh my gosh, they're going to choose somebody who disagrees with church teaching. They're going to choose somebody who's going to say, hey, don't listen to Father, what he says, you do whatever you want, right? Now, that was the fear, but we also knew what we're doing is not working, and they're going to the divorced friends, and we have to do something different, right? And we said, and this was a 3-hour conversation with Father Michael, who's an Augustinian trained, like discernment of spirits, all that. That he doesn't make a move without being 100% about something. So it was a long conversation, and we said, well, what if the mentor couple is on birth control? What if the mentor couple, says it's okay to keep, sleeping together? What if? And so we went through all the different scenarios, and we said, we have to be crystal clear that the mentor couple is there as a coach, is there as a friend, is there as someone to connect them to the parish. But they are not a theologian, they are not a counselor, and if we can be crystal clear about that in the beginning, who's responsible for what, maybe we can actually do something differently. The mentor couple, or sponsor couple, or coach couple, or accompanying couple, whatever you want to call them, their job is to connect the engaged couple to the parish and to help them develop the relational virtue necessary to sustain sacramental grace, okay? So think about it. Remember Ryan was saying that it was only 7 individuals out of 400 plus couples that said, I want a marriage like my parents. Okay, we call that remote preparation. So like the preparation that they had in their home prepares them for marriage, right? But most of them were saying, I don't want anything to do with that. I don't want that. But those same couples, we asked them, well, whose marriage do you admire? And they'd say, well, you know what, my older brother's best friend and his wife, or my older brother and his wife, or my godparents, or for the bride, and we hear this one all the time. The bride will say, there's a family I babysat for when I was in high school, and I really got to see them up close, and like the good, the bad, and the ugly, and what they went through, and how they struggled, and how they overcame. If we could have a marriage, that's the kind of marriage we would want. Okay, so we were hearing these stories. This was all prior to Witness Love. And so when we're visiting with Father Michael about having them choose a mentor, we said, Father, they all know someone. They might know him really well, they might not know him that well, but either way, they know someone. How about we invite that couple into the process? And now that we've been doing this since January 2012, we discovered that, has anyone heard of Dr. Popchak? Yes. He has a book called The Exceptional 7%, where he says basically, of couples who stay married, only 7% of them are happily married. Okay? That's a little scary in of itself. But what we discovered was that these engaged couples, they were choosing the 7%. Right? Remember, so they're bringing someone whose marriage they admire to walk with, and almost across the board, they were choosing the 7%. If they chose a couple that they thought was a 7% couple, but the couple wasn't a 7% couple, a lot of times that mentor couple would either, one, say, I'm sorry, we're not in a good spot. You think we have a great marriage, we're really struggling right now. Can you ask someone else? Or the mentor couple would say, we need to talk about it. And they talk and say, you know what, maybe this is God's way of like giving us a second chance in our marriage. Let's try it. And it will save their marriage. Okay, those are the 2 scenarios we saw. Again, we're looking at this in retrospect. But those mentor couples, their marriages were transformed. They had conversions. They got off of birth control. They became very active in the church community. The #1 reason that parishes like Witness to Love, they like it, they love it, because of the mentor couples, because of the transformation in their marriages. And something we also didn't know at the time, but we worked with Dr. Janet Smith and some other theologians on what in the world is going on? How can an engaged couple receive any sacramental grace in their relationship from a mentor couple who is perhaps on birth control? How is that possible? Because, right, you see they're not living out sort of the fullness of their marriage, and a lot of that's to do with the church not presenting the teaching to everybody. We all know all of these things. But what we discovered and what different theologians we've been working with helped us to understand is that you have in the evangelization, I'm sure everybody here at some point has or will be kind of presented on this evangelization language here, that you have wanderers, you have seekers, you have a conversion moment, right, like a St. Paul getting knocked off his horse, then you have disciples, and then you have apostles, okay? In the past, couples coming for marriage preparation were seekers or disciples. Today, that's no longer the case. The vast majority, 90+%, are wanderers. They are not coming for a sacrament. They are coming for a venue. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way, it's just a fact. They are coming for a venue. How can we help a wanderer who just happens to be showing up for sacramental marriage formation at your church? How do we help them become a disciple? Okay, this is what was happening. The engaged couple, who was a wanderer, was choosing a mentor couple who was a seeker. Very close to that Pauline conversion moment. And sometimes they were also, they could be a disciple as well. In being asked to be a mentor, and this is how the engaged couple is coached to ask, say that, as a gift to you in your marriage, the church, we are going to help prepare a couple to walk with you. We're going to coach a couple to walk with you before and after the wedding day. This is the church's gift to you. You bring us a couple whose marriage you admire, who's active in the church, has been married more than 5 years. You bring them to us. We will coach them and prepare them to accompany you, to walk with you before and after the wedding day. You can be sure to let them know they don't have to be a counselor, they don't have to be a theologian, they don't have to be an expert in any way. Their job is to walk with you, be a friend for you before and after the wedding day, and just witness their marriage to you. Who do you have in mind? And then let them think. They might ask you questions. Well, this couple, that couple, they'll go back and forth in front of you and say, well, think about it. Pray about it. Seriously pray about this. It's one of the most important decisions you could make, other than proposing to each other. Okay, so then they go to say, when you ask a mentor, this is how you ask. Say, we are getting married at St. John's in whatever, 8 months, and we were asked to choose a couple whose marriage we admire to walk with us. Not to be like a super expert or anything, just a couple whose marriage we admire to walk with us. And we've been talking about whose marriage we admire, and we would like to choose you. Would you be willing? The mentor couples are just like, oh my goodness, us? We don't have our stuff together. And you see there's such a positive pressure put on them to, wow, this. Usually their first reaction is first, oh my goodness, and then it's tears. They say, our kids never said to us anything like that. Our kids don't go to church. And here's this young couple saying, we admire your marriage. Can we go to church with you twice a month? Or, there's some things that we're going to be doing with you. We don't know all the things yet, but, would you be willing? Those mentor couples are blown away. The amount of positive pressure put on someone who's already in that sort of exceptional 7% that Dr. Popchak talks about is enough to propel them over the sort of St. Paul conversion moment. Does this make sense? Okay, they are already either on the fence or like they're either climbing the fence or getting off the fence on the other side. Either way, I promise you the Holy Spirit works so powerfully in who gets chosen as mentor couples. Engaged couples take it very seriously. The mentor couples take it very seriously. And seeing the conversions in the mentor couples is incredible. The other thing that we've learned over the years in working in evangelization and just in getting all this feedback from amazing pastors like Father Bryce Higginbotham and others is that, we're about to go to a break, is that the mentor couples, they are more likely, Grace builds on nature, so they have a beautiful marriage, beautiful friendship, and they are now growing in virtue with the engagement. We have all materials and videos and all kinds of things that they get to do together. They go on a double date, they go to church together twice a month. They're having fun, but they're growing in virtue together and being integrated into the church community. But the mentor couples, they're just kind of in awe that they were asked. The engaged couple sees up close, and they have a front row seat to the mentor couple's transformation in their marriage. Think about this. This mentor couple that they admire, that they've really kind of put up on a pedestal, becomes very real with them and basically says, look, we don't have it all together. We've struggled. We're still struggling. We're still trying to figure it out. We're still trying to get it right. But we're going to do this with you. And that the reality of that, for somebody who's a wanderer or a seeker, to have a front row seat to somebody who's becoming a disciple. I mean, think about the people that you've mentored and you've walked with, or maybe your own life, when you had that sort of conversion moment where you became a disciple, where you were still learning about Christ. Maybe you were kind of just on the edge of being able to give that life to others, to share Jesus with others. But it's a powerful moment. There's so many things, Curcio What do you have up here that's kind of like maybe alpha? You know those things where people go through and it's just a unifying, powerful, evangelizing experience where people meet Christ. Imagine having a wanderer experience all of that up close and personal with another couple. That is where the people always say, what's the secret sauce of witness love? I don't get it. Like, how are these couples all going to church? How are they all staying married? That's what it is. It's that wanderer having a front row seat to that 7% evangelization and transformation, okay? Someone they trust and admire. That is the sort of, we say, secret sauce. And remember I said we changed one variable. That today, in that parish, so to backtrack, 5 years after having couples choose their own mentors and sort of starting this whole witness love process, 5 years after that, all couples who had gone through that process over the past 5 years, not one was divorced, not one. We should have at that point had probably 9 divorces. There was not one. And we went from a 10% church attendance, which is what it was before starting this process, and those were couples who were already going to church before the wedding, so there wasn't really any increase. But in switching to having them go to church with their mentor couple twice a month, going on a double date, growing in virtue, building community, we had church attendance the very first year go up to 70%. And by 5 years in, it was up to 90%. Because there were so many young couples and families in church, and they were all friends of people who'd gotten married there, and they just knew what the expectation was, and the church community was so vibrant, and all their friends are in church, so why wouldn't they be going to church? So, again, that transformation, again, it's all about evangelization and discipleship and relationship, and we're using the marriage preparation process to ignite evangelization in couples who really are wanderers, who don't know Jesus at all. So we might take how about a 5-minute break, just a quick break so that we can have lunch and stay on track. We'll take a break, we'll take some questions when we get back from break, but Ryan's going to go into some of the sort of theoretical and attachment theory and some of the things from a Catholic sort of psychotherapy dimension of this interaction of what's going on with these two couples and how that can be used for evangelization. All right. Oh, there you go. Can you ask the question that you asked outside?
Okay, I asked about 1 million questions because I think it's all very exciting. But one of the things that we found, we're thinking, this could be difficult in our parish, but wonderful for our parish is we're on the seacoast, it's very transient. People come just for a venue. We also have, as you all know, Father Mark Montagne, the dynamic pastor. So everyone comes. They don't have to. We do so many marriage preps that have nothing to do with our own parishioners. But I guess what I was asking is how exactly does that work?
So, and I was saying that the majority of the parishes we work with are exactly that sort of scenario where maybe only 25% of people who come there for marriage prep who are getting married there are actually parishioners, whether they handle the marriage prep or not. We have a parish in San Diego, they have 110 weddings a year. The majority of their people are not parishioners. They're military, they're just all over the world. And so one of the key things we discovered was that honestly, probably in almost every parish situation, about 50% of the weddings are parishioners, or if they're not parishioners, at least they're going to be parishioners after the wedding day. The other 50%, they're not parishioners, they're never going to be parishioners there, they're going to be parishioners somewhere else. But in getting married at your church, and I'm quoting our pastor actually at the cathedral in Lafayette, they have about 60 weddings a year and only maybe 20 at most are actually parishioners. And he said, you know what, we can't charge them more and give them less. And I don't want my beautiful church, the cathedral here, to be an opportunity for a couple to disconnect from the life of the church. Because they're getting married here, we don't require that they have mentors, they just have to do a one-day deal and that's it. He said, and I know that's not going to get them involved in the church. He said, I feel like the beautiful church, he said, I have an extra responsibility to make sure that the marriage prep process gets them involved in the church. He said, not my church necessarily, but a church, their church, somewhere. So where they go to church, where they live now, where they're going to go after the wedding day, where their mentors go, wherever. But remember that paragraph 66, desire to be an active part of the ecclesial community. Doesn't say your ecclesial community, and that's what we were just talking about in the lobby. You don't have to worry about, oh my goodness, they're not my parishioners. Think about if we were all, everyone in this room, if each of us said, you know what, I'm not going to worry about where they're parishioners. I'm going to, for them to be an active part of the church, I'm going to introduce them to Christ. If we each did that, and I want them to stay married. If we each did that, think about, you'd all have these awesome young couples coming into your church communities that you didn't do anything, they just show up, right? I mean, that's one of the gifts of a parish. You say, oh my gosh, this couple just showed up. They're going to be teaching CCD and they're doing this and doing that. Let's burn them out, right? Isn't that like so exciting? Guess what? This new couple moved to the parish, right? So to think about if you could each say, you know what, I'm preparing for their parish. It's okay. Or maybe it could be another diocese, but if we all did that, we'd all have these awesome young couples that come into our parish that we could work with. So that is a great question. And whenever we give the big 6-hour trainings, that's the number one question. What if they're not parishioners? We're the Catholic Church, it's universal, so it's just a beautiful thing that we all get to work together and serve each other in that way. The other question about the mentors, that again, we always get this one too, is how are they trained? The mentor couples are not trained, they're coached. Because, and Ryan's about to go into this in a little bit, once someone is trained, they become an expert. What is the number one challenge in evangelization today? Does anybody know? What's the number one challenge? What makes it hard to reach those wanderers?
The very first step.
The
very
first
first step.
Right, and what is the...
Who are you and why are you here? What's your story?
But even if we do our best to reach out to them, what is sort of the number one barrier? We've all done it.
Trust.
Trust, exactly, that's it. And so if they don't trust us, we can't do anything. And the number one groups that young people today do not trust, they do not trust experts. They trust, Ryan says, Pope Siri and Google.
Google isn't in Pope Syria.
Yeah.
You know, even our kids who go to
Yeah.
school and go to
We
church,
don't know.
they're like, let's ask Siri what
Right.
she
You
thinks
don't
about
know?
God.
Let's ask Siri.
Yeah.
But so they don't trust experts, and they don't trust the church. They do not trust the church. They do not trust experts. And so we did this in the past, we would separate the engaged couple from the mentor. We'd say, we're going to have a training for the mentors. And the minute we separated the two couples, the engaged couple no longer trusted the mentor. Well, what did you tell them? What did they get that we didn't get? So in the Witness to Love model, we actually coach the two couples together. They are never separated. All the training is in the materials. But that's something that we found that was a unique thing missing from all other mentor models, was this understanding that the mentor's going to teach, the mentor's going to be the expert, the mentor has to be versed in theology and life skills and finances and everything. We're not qualified for all of that. Who is? I mean, that is a hefty thing, and so it eliminates the number of couples who can be witnesses in this process. So do you see that dynamic? So in the Witness Love material, it had to be like starting point, baseline accessible for mentors who had never heard of sort of the dynamics of church teaching. It had to be super, super starting level. All the other mentor material out there was just, maybe 10% of these couples could do it. It limited the pool that you were just right back to square one, where you had a burnout party for your expert couples. So we were trying to avoid that. So, and we'll take some more questions here in a little bit, but to keep us on track, Ryan's going to talk about the sort of the new model of marriage formation.
Anybody else has any questions? No? We thought, just maybe, if you want, we only have a couple of copies of these, but if you're interested in some of the data and some of the statistics that support what we do, maybe I'll just kind of pass these around. I can start one on this side. Funny story, I'd like to add some stories. We're talking a lot about trust, and I won't name the diocese, but
We have a lot of those kind of stories.
I'm not picking on anybody. We're all sort of unique birds, I suppose. But this one diocese had a training, and we came in something similar to this, and then they wanted us to come back, and the clergy were really kind of resistant to change and what the bishop was suggesting or telling them they should do, I suppose, you know. And so they wanted to come back and they asked if, said, you know, Mary Rose, we have a priest conference coming up, our clergy conference, and all the priests are together, and we would like for you to send over a priest. You know, we'll fly him in and have him sort of just as a priest, just speak to his experience of doing this and the sort of catechumen approach to marriage formation and all these things you're talking about, and you know, just get them excited about it. So this was the first person that came to mind, Father Higginbotham, Father Bryce, who we love. He's just down the road. We talk to him a lot, and there are quite a few other people. And so we kind of sent the video, and like immediately I got from the diocese there, oh, Father Bryce says he's not going to work. And we said, why is that? They said, oh, do you have anybody else in your network? And so we sent them another guy, and they're like, oh no, he's not going to work either. They're not going to trust him. And I was like, well, did you watch the video? No, we just we saw his face. And, and I said, well, can you be a little more specific? And so they said, well, do you have anybody a little bit older? And so we said someone a little bit older. They said, well, somebody who maybe had a little bit less hair. Then they said, okay, look, this person cannot smile when they're at the podium. So we called this other great priest that would help develop the civil marriage initiative somewhere in Texas. I won't mention his name. And I said, Father, this particular diocese needs a priest who doesn't smile, doesn't have too much hair, and is a little bit older, and perhaps a little bit jaded. And just wondering if you could go and kind of talk about your experience with being there. He said, what an insult. He said, but I'm in. It was a trip to, it was a diocese that was nice and warm in January. So it was a funny, you know, just a funny story about actually, but you know, trust and attraction. We'll talk about these things later, and how how we use this this body of ours, I suppose, to communicate what you know God does in the world is relevant. I guess through a theology of the body. But I wanted to talk about and sort of transition out when there is trust. You know, that basic component that we just overlook because they're like, oh, of course they trust us. We're good people. We go to Mass and we pay taxes and we don't get speeding tickets, and you know we visit the nursing homes and things like that, and you know we smile a little bit. But when those things are in place, this is the result. This is what it looks like, and that what I'm sharing with you is just some of the data that supports that. We didn't make this up. We discovered this. We discovered how to be human again in the midst of the church and how to use humanity as something to basically be the platform for catechesis and evangelization. What does that sound like? Christian incarnation. It's like totally, you know, Father Benedict Rochelle, I remember him, actually I heard this in New Hampshire. I was a student in Boston. I came to a men's retreat in New Hampshire, this was a long time ago, and he said rules without relationships lead to rebellion. Have you heard that? Rules without relationships lead to rebellion. It's not just about the Ten Commandments. Ten Commandments are important. Our kids still memorize them. But this relationship, which honestly, we grew up in the time, you know, in the late 90s, I was in school and college and grad school in the early 2000s, where it was really the most important thing was to get the orthodox documents correct, right? We were coming from an era, you know, we were in elementary school in the 80s and 90s where, you know, we're sort of balloons at Mass and you know, unicorns and all those things. I'm not picking on anybody, but it was a different time, and so we had to spend a lot of time making sure we got all the information right. And oftentimes, that for people who don't go to church, what does that sound like? Rules. We were like in a marathon getting the rules communicated, and that was only part of what St. John Paul II was. It was very times when there was this part. It was this humanity he was bringing forth. But these four components, now I apologize if it's blurry. We can get you all this stuff digitally if you would like. But what changed? So by the way, all these materials they're beautiful and they're fantastic. But a lot of this just came from these conversations Mary Rose and I would have on our own sofa. It was the only new piece of furniture that we had for the past 10 years, basically. Everything else was handed down because we had this big empty house. But it was something we used from our marriage funds. But on that couch, it dawned on me. I said, "These are the things. These are which resolve in this approach to marriage formation. Is that where you're mentoring? Actually, real mentoring comes. I wish there was a better word, but there's actually a real relationship and a model
where they are learning, where they're being shown what Christian marriage looks like in a society. So we're surrounded by a lot of nice people, right? So we're judging the world by all the nice people that we're around and interact with, but they're not around nice people. You know, they're not, maybe they might be nice in some ways, but the kindness, which is at the heart of Christianity, and generosity, this mentorship is discovered in this process has unleashed an energy. It has ignited an energy in the parishes that are using this process that is bringing generosity back. It is the number that is rising. It's beautiful to see, and it's sort of infectious because it makes you want to do more. It's amazing. Everybody's busy. This motto of where everybody sort of walks to church like Dick and Jane, we still read Dick and Jane to our kids, you know, like that's not real for most of us in the United States anymore. We don't live in Dick and Jane anymore, even though it's cute. We can't even find socks and shoes for some kids. But when they're coming though, there is some generosity that's being demonstrated by this couple saying, I want a marriage like you. Well, we just had our 5th child. We mentor people. When they ask us to be a mentor, can you imagine? Even us are sort of like, oh my gosh, how do we do that? But it's the, can you imagine? We're like, you know, supposed to be the founders, right? But they still get asked. And it's like, when do we do that? I'm coaching baseball. We're building a little office outside. You know, we have a newborn baby. You know, nobody's sleeping. We have driving kids to school. You know, making lunch. We make a lunch at home. But it's amazing the relationship that happens, and it's nothing like Mother Teresa, but I could only get a little glimpse of the energy that, you know, these religious that are so devoted, and this sort of love that kind of consumes them, and they just kind of give more. We're seeing that in normal baptized people who are married. Isn't that great? Yeah. Those second-class sacraments. Everybody's, you know, we can do a lot here. The second thing, the relationships, and I'll talk about this a lot more. I mean, the relationships, we say this oftentimes, the relationship is the platform for catechesis. When Christ became incarnate, it's like the 10 Commandments, St. Athanasius said, you know, we're not getting rid of things, but we know we're moving the idol aside for an icon. So the relationships become the sort of the platform, and we see this. These couples, and I was talking to the deacon earlier, you know, these newly married couples and these engaged couples are doing things with people that they like, and in the midst of doing things with people that they like and that they chose, they're learning about the faith. It's very different from them just sort of being assigned to us. Increased parish involvement. We'll tell you a story a little bit of this couple, Douglas and Elizabeth, wanderers, you know, working in different backgrounds, but that, you know, just many couples over time that they come from the same experience where the parish is growing. And we hear this from parishes who are using this process. And we saw this, and this is why we ended up wanting to share it, is that I had a recollection as a child standing and waiting for my mom and dad in front of the church and pulling on their pants so we can go get the donuts. But they were always just talking after Mass for like a half an hour. We just wanted to go, right? Now, a lot of places, you don't see people hanging out too much in front of the church. But I'm being serious, I'm being honest with you. We're seeing, and we've seen this over and over again, that these couples stay at Mass, they're coming to church, they're hanging around, they're finding a home in a society that is so hostile or just indifferent to Christianity and Catholicism. And it's a great gift. And we were able to represent that. Then, of course, the continued support that has evolved in this that has lowered the divorce rate. But in that case of support, you see the old way of doing marriage formation, marriage prep, and this new way. And so much of it hinges upon who? Jesus, absolutely, and this incarnate kind of like experience that becomes embodied into the generosity, almost the yes, the fiat of a mentor couple, you know, who didn't know what they were getting into, right? Who does that sound like? Blessed Mother, you know, this Catholic principle that just continues on and on again, and it's not foreign to any of us. It's, I think Mary Rose said this before couples were not in the church. I didn't understand iCloud all that much, but I will not pay attention to it right now. Mary Rose, are we not? So what we want to basically show here is it's important to see, this is a little bit of the story. It's not a commercial per se, but it's sort of some of the testimonies and backgrounds of people who have discovered this process and their thoughts on it. And these are not actors, these are all real people.
What is the enduring value of one good marriage? It's a question we've asked ourselves over and over through the years. The witness of one good marriage touches countless lives, transforms parishes, communities, and is a shining beacon in a hurting world.
Witness to Love is a ministry with a singular focus. The preparation and accompaniment of couples, setting them up for success as vibrant members of their parish community. We're introducing a culture where love can be revealed, supported, and lived. While proper formation is critical, we all know that alone it is not enough to keep newly married couples connected to their parish after the wedding day.
We know that in order for someone to experience a lasting conversion, they need solid, trusted relationships with people that are willing to walk with them through the ups and downs of life. These relationships require time, work, and a true gift of self to flourish. We have teamed up with the top experts in theology, marriage preparation, psychology, and evangelization to develop a truly new and holistic approach that sets the proper environment for intentional formation and authentic relationship building. These relationships become a lifeline back to the parish for the engaged and newly married couples, and the fruit we have seen has been tremendous.
Overwhelmingly, these engaged couples stay faithful, particularly in Mass attendance. I see them often in the Adoration Chapel, just wanting to get engaged, wanting to know what's going on in the parish. They just stick around. There's a life, there's a health in them. And I know it's a direct offshoot, a direct growth component of Witness to Love, so it's been a joy to watch.
The accountability that is just built into the program was wonderful, I think, for us. First, we had accountability with our mentor couple, somebody who we were friends with before, and so we continued to have a relationship with them after. And knowing that leading up to our marriage and even into our marriage, when we had a problem or needed a resource, we had them as an outlet. We knew that we could turn to them in times of need.
Each engaged couple is able to have an experience of not just an intellectual understanding of what marriage might be or some techniques of where they're going to go from here, but an experiential understanding of how marriage operates, not just in my own life, but in the life of other couples in our parish.
Es un programa que nos ayuda como pareja, para empezar nuestra vida, para fortalecer nuestras relaciones. Y es muy importante porque cuando nos casamos necesitamos ir fuertes, necesitamos ir sólidos, necesitamos ir valientes a este reto que Dios nos da.
Witness to Love is a great marriage preparation program, but it's far more than that. It recognizes that when two people come together and commit themselves to God and to one another in the sacrament of marriage, that this is an important transition in their lives. Their lives are changed. And Witness to Love provides a couple to walk with them, to mentor them, and to help them into that lifetime adjustment through the sacrament of marriage.
All I could think was that this just makes sense. That, no married couple should have to do marriage alone. We should all have a mentor couple and someone to guide us and support us during those times that we may struggle and fall, because we all know no marriage is perfect.
One of the things that's lost in our culture today is the art of mentoring. The ability to walk with someone one-on-one and to help them through life.
I think that's a real gift of the program, Witness to Love, is just to walk alongside an engaged couple and to share with them our experiences in marriage, the ways that we've gotten it right, the ways that we've fallen short, and the ways that we're still striving to make our marriage even better.
Our young couples are worth it. To bring them into the parish, to incorporate them, to build the relationships that build a bridge from the parish to the couples and back and forth. It's just been phenomenal and well worth
the sacrifices that we've had to make. There are a lot of programs and products being produced right now as the church seeks to wrestle with this crisis of marriage and family life that we face. Witness to Love, to me, is an authentic development in marriage preparation. It's solid Catholic content, it's beautifully produced videos and materials, and its attention to some of psychology's best insights make it a program worthy of exploration for anyone who is serious about the new evangelization.
Our engaged newly married couples desperately need a supportive community with authentic relationships. We hope that you will join us in this critical mission. Please visit witnesstolove.org to learn how you can be a part of the renewal. May God bless you and your ministry.
Those two look like that.
Those are the actors. One of my favorite lines in there is when David Dawson, who's the Family Life Director in New Orleans, he's also on our board, where he says it gives them not just an intellectual understanding, but an experiential understanding of what marriage and family life is all about. And then they sort of do the picture of the newly married couple with their mentors in church. That is one of the most beautiful things kind of about Witness to Love, because we hear so many stories of couples going to church with their mentors long after the wedding date, 5 years later. We were visiting recently with a mentor couple who had, this engaged couple they had worked with, who's now married 5 years, they have 3 kids, they own a CrossFit gym, so it's just a super awesome young couple. But the mentors, I said, how's it going? Do y'all still go to church together? I said, I know y'all were, you were doing great in the beginning. How's it still going? We were visiting at a diocesan event, and the mentor said, well, actually, we still go to church every Sunday together. We go to the 5 p.m. Mass at the parish on Sunday afternoon, evening, and we go out to dinner afterwards. And we have been doing that every Sunday now for 5 years. We've only missed it when one of us is out of town. And even then, like the spouse who's still home sometimes will go, she said, because the couple we mentored, she said, they have 3 kids under 5. They need us. She said, and we have 3 teenagers. And so she said, every one of their kids sits on one of the teenagers' laps, and they've been doing this for 5 years. And she said, not only, are we mentoring them, she said, they are mentoring our teenagers and showing them how to, hold little kids. And she said, maybe having kids when they're older won't be so scary for them, because it was just those are the kind of stories we hear over and over. So again, experiential understanding. There's a line in Amoris Laetitia that says that basically if we do marriage preparation right, these young couples will be a gift to the church community. And that sounds so pie in the sky unless you are doing this, giving them an experiential understanding. So.
And just another story that comes to mind, which just speaks to this. There's a priest that we really love working with in Detroit, and who his parents were divorced. It's really, many clergy and religious come from backgrounds where they come from divorced backgrounds, and he fasts every Wednesday. This priest on bread and water for all the couples he's preparing for marriage, and all those who had married, basically as sort of a spiritual bouquet from the healing that he received in his life from his own parents' marriage, which is a unique healing that needs to take place in marriage. Just another thing that comes to mind in that area, just sort of the sacrifice that comes from these mentors. We have a mentor, and we'll tell you about them a little bit later on. And we talk all the time about NFP. How does that important fertility awareness, how does that really come into play in this process, in the new evangelization, and basically how do you evangelize in that very important area, which is important to us, we know for sure, one of the big questions that comes up oftentimes when we're presenting this methodology is, how do you trust these mentors who are most likely, haven't had a true conversion with regards to fertility awareness. And we know that statistically, it seems that the Washington Post or Times, one of them said that probably only 2% of couples, Catholic couples in, fertile years, if that's a term, are using the church's teaching. So, that's a scandal if you think that only 2% of perhaps are actualizing sacramental grace if birth control is that impediment to grace that we know it is sacramentally. So what happens in that area? Well, when we were discovering this process, we had a priest in Virginia say, "Oh, I get why this works." He says, in the past we've been pairing up the Seton homeschool couple that goes to Mass daily, that has a lot of friends who are basically are priests and religious. We're pairing them up with a cohabitating, fornicating, contracepting, semi-porn addicted. This is the priest saying this, right? And he said, he's basically saying, happy trails, we hope you have a great experience with the church. You know, and they get through the binder and then they're done. And no one ever really talks again, right? So we know that story. But I'll give you one example. This, we'll talk about it earlier. Raymond and Becky, this guy called me. He said, I gotta tell you this story. He said, these couples that are cohabitating, that's hard. You know, it's hard to really bring that up. And we know all the stories from that first meeting, how that can go wrong. But he said, they said this mentor couple that has mentored probably 12 couples, over a three-year period, very generous. They had lost a son. You see their story later on. They love these couples they're mentoring. And these engaged couples choose them, right? And they didn't have this perfect marriage. They just happened to be really good human beings who love the Lord a lot. Well, one day they're in their getting ready for their fourth meeting, and before the fifth meeting, which is the clergy dinner night, where they have father and deacon over together for dinner. And the mentor couple said, after a couple of glasses of wine, this restaurant said, look, we let you know that we really love you two a lot, and that we want you to know that. And they were like, do you know that we love you? And this mentor couple said, yeah, we were, they're friends. The engaged couple, they said, we know that. And he said, but there's been one conversation that we've avoided often. And he said, that it is a conversation, it's the point that you two living together, cohabitating. And the reason why we bring that up is just because we love you so much. We can't imagine ever being in heaven, and as we hope to see our son, and not seeing you in heaven as well. And we know God can do some amazing things in His mercy, but we know that if we didn't share that with you at this point, that we just want to make sure that you are as prepared and to receive the joy on your wedding day and to be that new creation that you can be. And you shouldn't miss that opportunity. That couple cried in front of them, and she explained to them that she had never, and this is a normal wandering couple that has been in love on the process, and that couple, the mentor couple added, they said, and as a sacrifice for the next 2 months before your wedding day, Becky and I will abstain from that beautiful sexual part of our relationship as a gift for you. And his wife goes, really? And I think I talked about it, but they're a funny couple. They're a great couple, and they did. And that couple immediately started living as brothers and sisters. Like a couple days later, they said they were so impacted by that, and the girl cried and called them. She said, we had never, ever been told anything like that in our life. Had never felt love like that from anyone. That's the couples who are coming to the church to get married. But this is the opportunity they can receive when somebody, however the Holy Spirit makes this matchmaking work, the generosity that can be unleashed.
Those are the kind of stories we hear over and over and over and over again, everywhere we go around the country. And it is profound. And one of the things we've realized is just the ability for the mentor couple to be genuine, to be authentic, to really, and we have kind of in our workbook and our materials, there's basically the opportunity for them to share kind of their weaknesses, their areas to grow, how God is working in their life, and to have a conversation together, both couples, how are we going to grow together? Again, all other marriage prep sort of mentoring focused material is, I'm the expert and I'm going to walk with you. So, what we suggest is, if you do have a parish retreat, if you do have a particular material that you use at your parish, use that for the retreat. You're still going to do the retreat. Take the best of what you have that's really about encountering Christ, the sacrament, couple prayer, confession, those things. Have that at a retreat, which is basically after the fourth meeting. So in the witness love process, and we'll get into that after lunch, there are 6 meetings, but between meeting 4 and 5, there's the retreat. And that's really the opportunity. They've been going to church, they've been growing, they've been opening up. We've started in our material, sort of challenging them on abstinence, talking about friendship. You love somebody, what do you do for, how do you love them? All of that. So they're just like Ryan was saying in the story, they finally have enough sort of virtue and grace and stability and friendship in their lives that they can have these difficult conversations. and actually do something. Whereas before we'd say, well, we're not going to talk to you about a wedding unless you stop shacking up. And they'll be like, oh, okay, we're not living together anymore. Right? So we're not doing it in such a way that they can do it. I mean, think about it. We're asking someone, like, imagine, so this situation, the story Ryan just told, that's a totally different scenario, and it still took them a few days to decide to abstain, okay? Versus the way we have it now, where somebody they don't know, they don't trust, is saying, look, what you're doing together is sinful, okay? If you want to receive the sacrament, you got to stop doing that. I'm telling you that in love. But we don't know them, and they don't trust us. It doesn't matter how much we love them. They're just not going to listen. Or they're going to tell us basically a lie. We're setting them up. And in the rare case where they say, okay, wow, I never thought about that. Let's abstain. Again, that's a really hard thing. Maybe they've been living together for 2 or 3 years to say, oh, by the way, you have to abstain. They're going to, one couple, they did decide to abstain. I remember the bride called me and she said, we were abstaining for 3 weeks and we messed up. Like, do we have to call off the wedding? Can I go to confession? What do I do? Okay, this is the real situation. So again, just to think about that, we've been talking a lot about who are these couples that we're working with and who are these mentors who are kind of having their lives transformed. I want to kind of take a little deeper dive here and talk about some sort of radical areas of evangelization that you may not have thought of at the parish level. Something that we saw consistently over the past really 5 years, I would say, is that there was a decrease in sacramental marriages coming to get married in the church, but there was a increase in the number of what we call convalidations or blessings or ratification. There's all different terminology for it, but basically it's a baptized Catholic who got married civilly. So they got married on the beach, they eloped, justice of the peace, something like that, okay? There is such an increase in those numbers, while there's a decrease in sort of what we call traditional sacramental marriages. We also realized that there was no true process for them. There wasn't materials geared towards their situation, put together by people who had been through what we call a convalidation. So materials put together, resources put together by people who had been married civilly and could now speak to the grace of the sacrament. There was basically cobbled together stuff that was like, well, if you we'll just say spouse, but really you have to remember that you're not actually married in the church because the church doesn't recognize. You see, all these situations where it was more kind of off-putting for them. They were like, how can we reach these couples? There's so many of them in the church. The thing we saw through the traditional witness love process that we've been doing for the past 7 years was that couples who were civilly married, who came to the church to get married in the church, they felt like they were receiving a second-class sacrament. Okay, because maybe they didn't wait for an annulment, they got married civilly, they weren't going to communion, they were living on the peripheries of the parish. Many of them were going to church every Sunday, but they would leave like right before communion time. They couldn't get involved really in any ministry in the parish because they felt guilty. They didn't really see a path forward for them. Many of them, they didn't even want father or deacon to know that they weren't married in the church. Many of them were teachers of the Catholic schools. They were afraid they'd lose their jobs if they were found out to be married civilly. I mean, I can't tell you how many like crazy stories I've heard. But we did find that the couples who did come forward to have their marriage blessed, who went through the witness love process, where it wasn't just 1 or 2 meetings with father and then okay, we're going to bless, give you a blessing and get you out of this life of sin, where they were actually, okay, we're preparing you for a sacrament. Choose your mentors. Go to church. Grow in your marriage. You've had a beautiful relationship on a natural level, but we want you to have a beautiful relationship on a supernatural level. This is what a sacrament is. Those couples, because they could articulate in a way that no one else could, the difference between being married civilly versus being married with a sacrament. They became the key evangelizers in the parish community. Without sort of a real process for them, in the past, Father Michael he'd say, oh, I'll meet with them 1, 2, maybe 3 times, make sure they, they understand, that but mainly it was just paperwork, looking at annulment paperwork, lack of form. You ready to get married today? Okay, well, we'll have a blessing. Okay, a lot of them didn't even know the day that they went into his office that today was the wedding day, right? They just probably like, I think you're ready. You ready? Okay, let's do this. Okay, hey, secretary, come in. Hey, so come in. We need some witnesses. Okay, do you think that couple felt like they were receiving a sacrament? Okay, They were never integrated into the parish community. They had been living on the fringes of the parish. They stayed living on the fringes of the parishes. They didn't feel like something had changed in their lives because they weren't prepared. Okay? They needed the mentors more than anyone because the mentors kind of brought them into the community, right? Invited them to things, go to church together. They weren't going to leave early if they were sitting with their mentors. Do you see kind of the different dynamic there? And then we started getting asked by dioceses around the country, hey, have you thought about doing something for civilly married couples? Hey, so we got 9 requests from different dioceses over a 3-month period. We said, okay, I think it's the Holy Spirit. I think we got to do something, even though it was something we're thinking about maybe 2 years from now. So we said, okay, we started finding couples to tell their story. We started redoing all of our material. We needed to have videos made. We were trying to think about how are we going to do this. We were approached by our Sunday Visitor Institute, and they said, we've heard about what you're doing. Do you think that you could apply for a grant so that you could do this in such a way that any parish could afford to do it, really at little or no cost? We said yes, and so we applied for a grant, and we received a $60,000 grant from our Sunday Visitor. So the videos are gorgeous. There's social media campaigns for parishes. It's bulletin announcements, pulpit announcements, promotion, everything you could possibly need, like a top-notch digital and social media awareness campaign, yard signs, I'm telling you, everything was created so that at the parish level, cue cards, where you could say, you know what, we are going to reach every civilly married baptized Catholic within our boundaries, whether they go to church or not, and invite them to have their marriage blessed. And when they come forward, we're going to have a pathway for them, and they are not going to feel like second-class couples in our parish, okay?
We have a parish starter kit for everybody.
Yes, and we do have a free parish starter kit for this civil marriage initiative, thanks to our Sunday Visitor, for every parish. So if you could just take one per parish, you can grab those during the lunch break.
Which I think they might want soon. I think it's ready to lunch.
Oh, the lunch is ready? Wait, what time is it?
Yeah.
It's noon?
11:56.
Okay, good. I'll use the last 5 minutes.
You can do it, whatever.
Okay. But we knew this was critical and important, and parishes that have already launched this campaign, they have Catholic school teachers coming forward, couples from the parish school, couples who in the parish community, put it in the Easter bulletin, couples coming forward. They had to hire someone just to work with civilly married couples coming forward. Those couples, they are really, and one parish told us, they said, we realized they're volunteering for CCD, they want to get involved in RCIA, because they relate to these couples, or they'll say, I went through RCIA, their process could be better, I want to be a part of it. Again, we need those couples in our community, number one, because the traditional sacramental marriage rates are dropping. This is a whole new opportunity to reach couples who were just never formed. We just haven't invited them back. A lot of times they feel judged, or like what we're offering them just isn't really what they need. Where they say, I've been married for 10 years, I don't need what you have. But we need to offer them something they do need, that they're going to value, and that is going to sort of renew their lives. So this clip that I'm going to play is just a sort of a sneak peek at some of the things that civilly married couples say after they have their marriage blessed, and going through the witness to love process. It's super short.
My first wedding, it was a civil wedding. One day we realized we need the sacrament of marriage to fulfill our relationship.
I just knew that we needed to have our marriage convalidated so desperately so we could continue to grow and be in communion with not only the church, but in communion with God. Our kids are growing up faithful, and we can give them a good example what true sacramental marriage looks like.
Why would you desire to have your marriage convalidated? I'd like to give you 3 reasons. To get right with God, to strengthen your marriage and your family, and for the grace of the sacrament. And hey, when you come, we're just here to love you and to walk with you. We're not here to judge what's happened in the past, and we just want to welcome you completely into God's family, into our family.
Even though we was married civilly, it didn't feel right.
In our hearts, we knew that.
And we want to be
we wanted to get back on track. So at our 5-year civil anniversary, we had our marriage validated in the Catholic Church. We were excited. It was our real wedding. You know, this is how we felt. It's almost like we just...
It was like a grace, like it was a blessing to know that you're on the right track.
Witness to Love has developed this program for those in civil marriages who want to have their marriages convalidated so that we can walk with them well. And so that convalidation is not just a piece of paper, but that they can receive the grace of that sacrament and that it can bear fruit because we have done our job helping them to prepare.
Witness to Love has totally changed marriage prep in our parish. Previously, you would meet with your priest, you would take a little focus inventory or some sort of inventory, meet with a couple to go over the results, and boom, you would let go. The materials are just, they're realistic, faith-forming, and what we hear is the impact that it had on the mentor couple's marriage and relationship with the church just by working through those enriching materials.
Yes, we had the mentor couple say, wow, this was fantastic for us.
I was inspired by our mentor couple, just seeing how they lived their lives and how happy they were living with Jesus at the center of their marriage.
And not making it where you just want to hurry up and get through it, but it's where you learning stuff. I mean, I'm learning, and it's fun learning. It's not just boring. The people we surrounded ourselves with now, the church community is awesome. I married her twice. I married her 3 times. It's good.
Going through the program, we were able to evaluate what we had been through. Those wounds again were exposed, but we were able to see that they didn't dictate or rule our life and what we had overcome. We have better communication. We don't hold grudges. Pat and I have truly fallen deeper in love authentically with one another.
And I'm not worried about anybody slipping through the cracks. Nor am I worried about anybody not getting the formation that they need for lack of time or lack of energy on my part. I am better able to father my people than I could by myself.
If you're missing the sacrament of marriage, you're missing out. You don't have to control everything.
Yeah,
you let
exactly.
God take control.
And how you got it on yourself?
What I know now is, going through Witness to Love, that the two have become one flesh.
That's beautiful. We could do this all day. What else you got?
Those couples, I mean, I could go on, but they're just so beautiful, and that the couple where the girl looked like she was part Native American Indian, she is part Native American, and they were a civilly married couple who went through Witness to Love, I guess about 7 years ago, and before we had kind of figured out the whole process. And this past year, they were chosen to be mentors twice. So they said they're Witness to Love grandparents or something like that. But it's beautiful to see kind of when these couples kind of come alive instead of just living on the sort of peripheries of the parish. But those are just little clips of all the videos that these civilly married couples would watch with their mentors at the parish.
And one last point about that is that I feel like this opportunity is providing a lot of hope and healing in families. And I mean, let's face it, there's a lot of young people my age and younger that have just got married outside of the church. And that, I have siblings like that. And that's hard for my parents who are celebrating their 46th wedding anniversary. And, my dad used to kind of kick us out the door to get to church when we were young. But I mean, I was one of 4 boys. I mean, to get us ready for Mass, I mean, it was sort of rough. And, they can't, my dad and mom can't do that anymore. And so now they're trying to prayerfully, witness in some ways that hopefully some of my brothers who got married outside of the church would come back, But I think that's a big number in the United States. And we love what we're seeing in this process. There's parishes and dioceses using this, and they're creating an opportunity to make sure that everyone in their parish boundaries or diocese over a 1 or 2 year period would at least be invited to have their marriage blessed. So this is invitational terms. This is makes room for the Holy Spirit, and it creates a process that actually is providing some renewal and some uptick in numbers in the Church in the United States instead of it going down. Just while you're finishing lunch, we just wanted to give you a little sneak peek into the testimony of a mentor couple in this process, and just their thoughts on it. And as you can see, and I think the conversations we have with many people, that the mentor couples is a real gift. You know, the marriage enrichment and the growth and healing that takes place in these existing marriages and parishes become sort of the catalyst that ignites, you know, I think a more personalized experience of marriage prep for these young couples. But this is actually the couple, Raymond and Becky, that I was talking about earlier, that, you know, that sort of made this amazing sacrifice for this couple that they had mentored. And you'll see their story here. So they're from South Louisiana. Everyone is from, obviously, but there's a great couple, so they have real, of course, Louisiana accents. If I have an accent, I don't know. But they're great. And just as we're kind of transitioning from lunch into the rest of the afternoon, I wanted to show this video.
Ray and I met in high school. We were in math class together, and we sat next to each other. And I was a new kid on the block because it was my first year. He pretty much was the type person where he was very friendly. Of course, back then, because I was a teenager, thought he was flirting. But anyway, later on in life, knew that he was a very friendly person. He would talk about his girlfriend, and I would talk about my boyfriend at the time. And we formed a very close friendship. Later on in life, I was engaged and lost my fiance through a automobile accident, which Ray knew him very well also. As time went on, one day I came home, and across the street where I lived, my uncle had a grocery store with one gas pump in the front. Well, Ray was coming back. He was a National Guard at the time, and he was coming back. On the way, he fell asleep on the wheel, ended up hitting the gas pump. Well, when I got home and saw all the craziness going on, I asked my mom, I said, what's going on? And she said that Raymond Rodriguez hit the gas pumps. And I said, oh my God. So automatically I sent him flowers. Well, after that, he can tell you what.
Well, when I got the flowers in the hospital, my mom was with me, sitting on the side of the bed with me, and automatically she said, "You're not going to read the card?" So I said, "No." I said, "Mom," I said, you know the flowers are from Liz, my girlfriend." And she said, "Well, no, you have to read the card." So I said, "Well, okay, Mom." I said, "Read the card." So when she opened the card, it was from Becky Latch. We used to call her Latch in school, for Latchley. And I think that's where the spark started between her and I. And in January, her and I started seeing each other. In fact, the first 3 dates that I asked her to go on, she stood me up on the first 3 dates. The first time I went to her dad's door, and I knocked on the door, and I said, "Is Becky here?" And he said, "No, she's not here." So I just got in my car and left. The second date was the same thing. But after the third date, when I knocked on the door, he just opened the door and he said, "She did it again." She did it again. So I said, he said, "I'll see about that." He said, I'll talk to her. And after that, it was just a work in progress. We started dating in January. For April Fool's Day, we were engaged. But yes, this September afterwards, we were married, her and I. the whole time I felt I was second best in the marriage because of her fiance that had passed away in a car accident. Just felt I was second best in her life. I despised her boyfriend. And that's a shame to say, but that you despise a dead person. And it worked a lot on our marriage. We had a lot of struggles in our marriage. I had a conversion probably about 7 years ago. My spiritual director was Father Joe Campion. And one Saturday I called him and I said, I need to talk to you. We spent about 3 hours sitting knee to knee, face to face. And I started telling him my story about my life, our life. And he just started crying, and I told him how I was struggling with it. And after about 3 hours, he asked him, I said, well, Paul, I said, what should I do? And he just looked at me straight in the eye. Straight in the eye. And he says, Monday morning, he said, I want you to go to your church office. And he said, I want you to make some masses for her dead boyfriend. Becky got home that afternoon around 5 after work. And I told her, I said, we need to talk. And I said, let's go on our swing, our famous swing that we always share all our bad and good stories. We sat on the swing, and I told her exactly how I felt. I had never told her in almost 38 years. I hadn't told her exactly how I felt. And she just looked at me and said, she said, I can't believe you were holding this in for so long. She was the one healing me. I was kind of like hurting really, really, really bad.
Always evading the subject or trying not to get on to a sensitive area because we were tired of hurting. Yeah. Both of us were tired of hurting.
I just forbade him to talk about it. I didn't even want to hear his name in my household.
In a certain sense, it was an injustice to Raymond, having to do with starting our life with my unsureness, my not finishing the healing.
And we just both started crying. And that was the start of our spiritual life. I think if every couple opens up that communication skill, I said that's the ticket.
When we lost our son at 22 years old, right at the moment when the policeman said that we lost our son, my daughter and Ray just fell to the ground. And I just stood there. The first thing I thought of was my son was sacrificed to release me from chains that were on me for all those years. Because I had such a fear, I lost once. I had a horrible fear of losing again.
We understand our son's death so much more easier now. I mean, our son was just loaned to us. I mean, he was really God's son. You know, he was just, we had him just borrowed for a while. It's funny how when our son died, he was engaged to be married. And a couple of years after he died, she ended up getting married. And she involved his little fiance, my son's fiance, involved Becky and I in the wedding, in the birth of her first child, her second child. And to this day, her kids call Becky and I Mamie and Papa. And I look back at my life on Becky's boyfriend that passed away. And why couldn't I have done the same thing with my kids to her ex-in-laws. You know, I feel like I was more of a hypocrite than anything else. I should have.
Well, you couldn't. You didn't have the knowledge. You didn't have.
I should have allowed my
The
kids to know
tools.
those people. So.
I know that. I think there's a reason for everything in life. No, I don't think I know. And the only way to heaven is by accepting life, accepting whatever is given to you, and to work on the positive. And it's not always that you know. You just don't have it yet. And you didn't have it yet. And to this day, it still breaks my heart. But I do what I can. Do what I can.
I was surprised at one time. We went to the cemetery to see my mom. And her boyfriend is buried in that cemetery. So after we visited with my mom for a while, I told her, I said, let's go find David's tomb. And she was like, really? And I said, yeah. I said, let's go pray for David. And she had forgotten where he was buried.
Yeah.
So we had to kind of like walk the cemetery.
It's okay.
Marriage is not.
It's not easy.
Yeah.
And it's not supposed to be easy.
Yeah. We didn't have a Cinderella story in our marriage.
No. And
a lot of couples look at Becky and I now and they say, oh wow, how great of a marriage they have. But like I said, it wasn't a Cinderella story. It's pretty tough on us. I think God breaks a person down for a reason. And I think that the reason for us was to be able to share with the couples in the Witness to Love program. When we first started mentoring, and I said, you know what? I said, if we have to do this 100%, I said, we have to tell the 100% of the story. We can't leave anything out. And one couple said, man, he said, if y'all made it through 45 years of marriage, going through what you all went through, he said, we have a remote chance of going through a marriage. Becky and I learned more about our marriage when we started with this program, with the couples. We've learned so much more than we did when we went to marriage courses.
Everyone should go through this. I don't care how many years you've been married. I think everyone should go through this. It's just
unbelievable.
Because it made us regroup, having to do with our lives. So it renewed us. It taught us, remember back. And it's a great tool.
You have to make a marriage work. You have to keep God in the center of your life. I think everything else falls in place.
Our story is not exactly a Cinderella story, but it ended up being a Cinderella story. We've fallen back in love. Mine and I started a Cinderella story, but now it is.
Yeah.
Now it is. So we're very grateful for that. We thank the program for that. And I thank Raymond for saying yes. Even though at first I didn't.
I feel like George in the jungle.
Yeah.
I think great. Covered great, yeah. I wanted to show that, just go back a little bit. So beforehand, sorry.
You stayed.
Just saying, like a road was right. But before we kind of move forward, I want you to just kind of think, make sure you process. We talked about, kind of go over the same thing over and over again. But this is, Raymond and Becky have been chosen 13 times. This is sort of just in one of the parishes that is, has sort of developed this catechumenate approach to marriage formation. They've been chosen 13 times. Now, before they were ever chosen, though, Raymond and Becky were never part of the marriage formation and marriage process in the parish because, they maybe have the advanced training, or maybe he didn't finish high school, maybe he was just a carpenter, they weren't CCD teachers. But like, what were the engaged couples choosing? they weren't choosing us. Sometimes they do. As 2%ers, I like to say, they were choosing this amazing couple that has been so impactful, and they're staying together in touch with each other. And we hear this story from around the United States and Canada. It's the same thing over and over again. It's unleashing this energy in parishes that it's been beautiful to see. In fact, I love this saying from a young priest in Baltimore. He had just gotten ordained, and he loved this. And we were doing this training with him, and he says, look, I get why this works. He said, he's like one of 10 kids. He loves families and marriage. And he said, in this process, you've actually created and you've allowed for the Holy Spirit to work. And we said, well, okay, Father, we understand that. He said, but no, don't. We said, wait. He said, but in every component of the new evangelization today, he said, it must be a place where you have to take a risk and allow the Holy Spirit to do something that only the Holy Spirit can do. And he said, the risk you're taking is allowing them to choose who's going to be a part of their formation process. And I love how that works. And it kind of leads to, I think, a real understanding from maybe a scientific or a psychological perspective of why this process works. When we were seeing the results 7 years ago, I had studied clinical psychology at the Institute for the Psychological Sciences in Virginia. That's where I met Mary Rose. And when we were seeing these results, a good friend of mine who's a PhD PsyD in Nebraska, I was telling them about this. I said, these couples are coming to Mass, and they're actually hanging out with their mentor couples. We see them together. People are like smiling. And this guy loves evangelization. He said, and how basically understanding atheism and how to move people into faith. And he said, Ryan, you just applied attachment theory to the marriage formation process. He said, you're applying attachment theory to a group of young people that are in some ways have a very, not infantile, he didn't use that word, but a very, a low appreciation of relationships, and actually have a lot of anxiety about relationships. So if you know about attachment theory, I would imagine a good number of you do, it's sort of just that theory that expresses the natural way we bond with our mothers and our parents, and depending on how well that went in those early years, we have a better sense of security when we leave home, or we're anxious about relationships. But whether they say it or not, a lot of young people have a lot of anxiety about relationships. In fact, we've all heard and been told that 50% of all marriages end in divorce. That's not correct information. It speaks in some of the car keys, I think, isn't. Sorry. Oh, is it taken? Okay. So our children's godfather is from Boston. He's actually a priest of the Archdiocese of Boston, Father Eric Caden, the vocation director there, and a good friend. He's just amazing. So he said he gets all his homily materials a couple of a year at his parish on marriage and family around our kids. So I said, good. Don't ever tell a mother to walk outside of the church with that baby that's crying, please. Anyway, but attachment theory it shows this. And when we were taking some questions earlier, like how do you kind of solidify that process with the mentor, when they choose, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on, like how do they choose a mentor. But the coaching session for the mentor, basically in a way that makes sense to you, the way you could speak of this from your heart, you're saying that the mentor is providing that necessary secure relationship to the church, and to the parish. That might sound, and we used to talk about mother of the church, and people don't use that language too much, but faith, in a way, we receive when God is a father, and the church has this sort of feminine role, and it's a level of relationship. And we see that attachment theory really helps them to be not pacified in a way, but basically soothe, so emotionally, so they can better understand the faith. Does that make sense at all? But it's what has made this work, and I really see it's so much like the incarnation. It's how we learn. I say this over and over again, that human beings, we grow first and foremost within relationships, and outside of relationships we can't grow. That's why the more we isolate ourselves and pull back and resist
the needs of others around us, the less human we become. But the more we give, you know, even as uncomfortable as it is, you know, never sitting down and never sleeping, you know, it makes us more human. It's just the craziest thing. And the mentor couple basically personifies that. And I love this quote from Mother Teresa. She says, kindness has converted more people than zeal, science, or eloquence. And I mean, how many of us have been just given the treasure of the church's intellectual tradition, which is remarkable and it's so needed. But I was saying earlier, you know, in St. Thomas Aquinas understood clearly from Aristotle that faith builds upon nature, right? Grace builds upon nature. But grace can't just build on nothing. It has to be the nature that's open. And the mentor couple is tasked, and I think it's Holy Spirit led, to basically show the engaged couple the nature of marriage. Not the theological component, not there to unpack all these things, they're showing the nature of it. And it gives it the context, right? That's the whole hinge point of this. I mean, I could tell you this in 5 minutes, and then you can probably figure out the rest by reading the names. But this is how it all comes together. That might be a good point to just take some questions. Practically, does anybody have any questions or thoughts about this? Yes, sir.
Are you going to get into what a coaching session looks like?
Yes.
Because I'm trying to.
Yeah, and I need to just double check on at what point, because you know, so we the invitation, and we're so grateful to be here, was to kind of talk about the overviews of evangelization in this area of marriage formation. At a certain point, for those who want to stay and kind of understand how the process sort of becomes rolled out. At what time is that wanted the transition to be? Because just to clarify, there are some people who are not at this time would not want to do something new with regard specifically to our marriage prep process. But for those who do want to stay, that's what we're going to do. Is that around 2 o'clock? Is that correct? Does that sound good? Is that what everybody's anticipating? Okay. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Do you have this material available for us to take back home?
We do. So here, we have this every parish that's come, you can grab one of these civil marriage starter kits. And then we have a parish review set that we have to send to you in the mail. Believe it or not, there were 2 boxes being sent. One got damaged, UPS, and so I was so proud. I was like, where's the other box? And it didn't show, so I called people who shipped it, and they tracked it, and it was been damaged. So totally out of our hands, but we will get that to you. All I need is basically your name and your address, and that'll be put in the mail for you this evening, if that's okay. But what that is, it's a parish review set, and that's just a cost of you is just $55. So that just pays for the material and the postage, and from there you'll be given access to start the training, which is kind of goes further detail than this, but we'll be getting to in a few minutes. Hope I'm not throwing anyone off with those kind of details, but we'll have that. We can get you those materials and those coming back up. He was asking about one person was asking about the sort of that first initial meeting with the couples, which we'll start probably talking about a little bit, and then basically if they wanted to get trained, what would be the next step?
Well, see, and normally when we do a 6-hour training, we go into every meeting, what it looks like, the encounters, the dynamics, the takeaways, the goals, you know, all of that. But today's presentation is supposed to be sort of an evangelization in marriage formation training. So whatever you're doing in your parish, you could do it better, as opposed to this is how you do witness to love. So that being said, we were also told that if you want to do witness to love, you have 100% blessings. We would love for you to do it, and that anyone who stays kind of on at the end will walk you through, okay, this is how you order the materials, this is what you're going to go through for the formation. And it's about 3 hours of online training. We have it's like an app we get trained with videos, very similar to the ones you've seen, but it goes in depth. You'll see actual meetings with couples and mentors, and they'll talk about the theology discussion night. It's all covered in depth, but it is about another 3 hours to kind of do all that. So that's why it's sort of added on for everybody here today. But we'll walk you through, for those who stay, what's it going to look like, how are you going to do it, and all of that.
Any other questions?
Do you run into some couples who are not able to have their marriages blessed because they're not able to get an annulment? Do you come upon that?
We were visiting with Father Gavin, who is the main sort of canonical priest in Tyler, Texas, who has been tasked by Bishop Strickland, who's bishop, with just working with couples to invite them to have their marriage blessed. And so what we've seen obviously is there are couples who maybe they aren't able to have their marriage blessed. It's, I would say, more rare than anything. We've seen two different responses to this, and we did a survey before we launched the Civil Marriage Initiative. We asked every parish, we said, hey, when you have a couple who needs an annulment come forward, who wants to have their marriage blessed, or they start the conversation, do you ever allow them to start the marriage prep process before receiving an annulment, or do you make sure to wait till after they receive an annulment? And it was 50-50, the surveys that came back, and some parishes said, well, we don't tell them it's marriage preparation, we tell them it's marriage formation. Because, we're basically saying, hey, if you are to be married, these are the tools and the things that you need, but we're not going to say we're preparing you for marriage until we receive the annulment paperwork. But we are going to maybe invite you to join Alpha, or, do something that's going to introduce you to Christ and maybe trickle down into your marriage, obviously, or into your relationships, or being a better father, better mother. So they basically were just very straightforward with the couple, saying we can't prepare you for marriage when canonically you're still in this other marriage. So, we need to presume that. So as long as that's said in a very, loving pastoral way, couples usually think, oh, no, I'm a little disappointed, but I understand. Other parishes are like, you know what, you can start the process. If the paperwork comes through, great, everything will go as scheduled. But if it doesn't come through, please don't be upset with us. So you can see either way somebody's going to get upset at some point if things don't work out, obviously. But we know a couple that they abstained for 20 years waiting for their paperwork to come through. And they weren't upset with anybody, but turned out they didn't even need an annulment. It was just a lack of form. Their paperwork had been processed wrong 20 years ago. And they were then past trial for many years, and I think they only had one child, right, before they had started this process. So it's just, you see, there's so there's some just incredible heroic stories out there.
Stories are so personal sometimes that they're not an opportunity, a relationship to share, and they're trying to sort these things out themselves, and just a really good couple, so.
But you have to kind of go with what your diocese does, and talk to the tribunal here in Manchester and say, what do you, like if a couple was to call your office, what would you tell them? Because we want to speak the same language. It's really important, and something that we highly encourage as part of this sort of civil marriage initiative. Okay, can one representative from each parish raise your hand so that Ryan can give you one of the free civil marriage initiative sets? And if you go to our website, witnesstolove.org/civil marriage, if you fill out a little survey there, it will kick you to a sub-page that has all the free digital media stuff to do this in your parish. So you're getting the kit to go with it for free, but when you fill out that form, it'll kick you into all the digital content. Okay, all the videos, all the PR stuff, social media, graphics, everything. Okay? So just keep your hand up until Ryan gives you the set.
Just to follow
Question, yes.
up on her question was, as we were heading to lunch, you were telling us about all this material that invites people to come forward. And I could see like an initial influx of a bunch of people, and then a lot of, deciphering whether or not there are impediments right off the bat, and then, having to deal with, okay, so how do we handle that?
Correct.
Then move forward. But then I think after the initial influx, I think it would probably settle down and we'd have a steady flow of people.
It is a steady flow, because what happens is when someone has their marriage blessed in the church, if you do their preparation properly, they will invite their friends to attend. Yes. When they invite their friends to attend, their friends also tend to be civilly married, and they're like, I want what they have. Yeah. And so you have just, it multiplies, and it's just a beautiful evangelization in the community. Did you tell the story of Doug?
By the way, does anybody, we have some extras here if somebody's, if you want more than one.
If somebody's got a cluster, and maybe there's somebody in parish who didn't make it, I think sister would like another also. And if there's another parish that you work with or that you're friends with, and you're like, you know what, I want to bring it to Father so-and-so or whatever, please do take it. So there was a couple that we had worked with. It was a similar thing. We said, this was a little, probably just over 7 years ago, we said, okay, we are seeing couples who are civilly married, who have their marriage blessed, get divorced at a higher rate than just your average couples coming forward, because again, remember, they don't have the support of the community in the same way. And that's when Father finally decided, he said, you know what, we need to give them everything that everybody else is getting. He said, I just, in good conscience, I feel like we have to at least try it. And it's the same thing, they come forward and they say, we've been married for however many years, we don't need anything, we're married. Because they all know, you know, we can all do better in our relationships, and we want you to have the best. We want you to be a beautiful part of this church community, and this mentor couple that you choose is really going to bridge you into the community in a beautiful way. So they're like, oh, okay, we'll give it a try. And so the first couple that came forward, the husband, they'd been simply married for 1 year. He had 2 kids from another relationship. She had a daughter from another relationship. And he had been in a federal prison for dealing in crack cocaine, and had since come out, and he worked in septic, he cleaned septic tanks, and then his wife worked in a drive-through, at a restaurant. And they came forward, and when I looked on paper, because I hadn't met them yet, and Father gave me we have a witness love intake form that Father fills out and gives to the coordinator, just a snapshot of opportunities for evangelization. And Father wrote in like all caps at the bottom, awesome opportunity for evangelization. I looked at it and I was like, Father, can we like skip this couple and like give me the next one? I said, let's just do what you normally do with couples for this. And he said, no, we said we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And he said, it was mainly your idea. I said, okay. So okay, we're going to do it. So I told Ryan, I said, he's been in jail. I didn't at the time know what it was for. I said, I'm going to just go to the mentor couple's home and meet there, because I don't want him in our home, because I don't know what he was in jail for. And Ryan's like, okay. I said, look, put the Find My Friend thing on the phone so that like if I disappear, you know where I am. And so I get to the home and I'm visiting with them. I never asked if he was in jail for. They had chosen lovely mentor couples, amazing couple. I said, this is all going to be great, awesome, bye. 3 months in, the mentor couple's wife was hospitalized. And the bride of the still married couple called me back and said, look, our mentors can't help out. We're scheduled to have our marriage blessed in 3 months. This means so much to us. Like, what do we do? And I said, choose another mentor, And we were still trying to figure things out at this point. And she said, if you knew our situation, you would know that was the only couple we knew that fit, the guidelines to choose. And I said, well, do some asking around. Maybe your parents' friends, somebody. I'll talk to Father. We'll see if we can come up with something. A week later, she calls me. She says, well, we've talked about it and prayed about it, and we choose you and Ryan. And I was just like, no. Nope, not doing this. And I'm thinking, we have to go to church with them. We've got to go on a double date with them. They got to be in our home. We're supposed to love them. This is not going to work. I'm not doing it. And so I called Father, and I said, Father, get me off the hook here. And he goes, that is the best. He said, you've been talking about this all this time, like how good it is for the mentor couples. And he's like, I think it's great. You get to experience what you've been raving about. And we were just like, And so at the time, we had 3 kids, 4 and under. And I told Ryan, he's like, oh, I don't know about this. And he's like, which couple is it? And I said, it's the one you didn't meet because the husband had been in jail and I went and meet at the mentor's home. That couple. And Ryan's like, that couple. And so they showed up at our, there he is.
This is actually the guy we're talking about right here.
And that was his mentor couple, the husband, in the middle.
Yeah.
And they're putting in our plumbing right now as we speak for our new Witness to Love Hospitality Center.
And they're volunteering. So
and they're volunteering.
Not going. Can you imagine? And he's volunteering his time helping with our septic.
But so the fact, so he shows up, Douglas, the guy with the purple hat at the end, shows up at our home with his wife Elizabeth. They show up 30 minutes late, straight from work. Oh. It smelled like food and septic. The worst possible combination.
Fried food.
Fried food and septic. And sat on our only new piece of furniture. And I'm just like, this stinks. Literally, I am so frustrated right now. Remember I said I didn't like the couples and I didn't love the couples? That was the peak of not liking and not loving couples. And God was really kind of like shaking us up a little bit. And I was thinking, we're going to teach them all this stuff, and we're going to, impart our wisdom to them. I put on the expert hat, accidentally. And they sat on the sofa, and Ryan went to go turn on a show for the kids. And I said, I'm going to ask Douglas what he was in jail for. So I said, hey, I heard from Father you were in jail. What were you in jail for? And he said, well, it wasn't jail. He said it was federal prison. He said it was for crack cocaine. And he said, but while I was there, he said I was there 6 years. And while I was there, I joined a Bible study, and I met Jesus. And for like the next 10, 20 minutes, he talked about his relationship with Jesus. And to date, I have never in my life heard someone talk that way about Jesus. And I realized he had a relationship with Christ I did not have. And he loved him in a way that I did not. And he was so real and so genuine and so humble and so excited to have us be their mentors. We were so humbled by that whole experience. They started going to church with us. Our kids are sitting on their kids' laps. Their kids were baptized. All of them, none of them had been baptized. They had their marriage blessed. When it was time for them to have their marriage blessed, they had abstained. They had used NFP. They had invited 60 of their friends to have their marriage blessing. Father didn't know this. And the church started filling up. Father was like, oh my gosh, what is going on? And then Douglas and Elizabeth walked in their wedding clothes. And I didn't recognize them. And Father said, what have we got ourselves into? I said, Father, I think until now we weren't preparing couples for a sacrament. We were preparing for a second-class sacrament. I said, and Douglas and Elizabeth, they realized what they were receiving and they showed up for it. And Father said, well, I've got 60 people here I can preach to. I have a captive audience. And
These are not church people.
no, they were, a lot of them weren't even civilly married, but they had kids and they had purple hair and earplugs and they were all just kind of there. And they listened, and they loved it, and many of them came and got married.
Long, like St. Ambrose homily, sort of on the theology of marriage. It was great at it, but no one budged. It was amazing.
It was honestly, other than our wedding, I think the most beautiful wedding we've ever been to. And they chose us that day, we didn't even know it, to be the best man and the maid of honor.
Sounds like Father owes you another bottle of wine.
He's got a few since then. So anyway, just to show, now that couple they lead RCIA at the parish. Their kids are altar servers. They are completely involved in the parish, and they are evangelizing. And they are bringing people into the life of the parish that Ryan and I, you and I, we would never be able to really, touch. A year ago, Douglas's mother showed up and wanted to talk and was sitting on our front porch swing, and she said, I wanted to share that, she said, I've been a cocaine addict almost my entire adult life. She said, but every Sunday when Dougie would call me to pick me up, to bring me to church with him, because he was going to church with you and he wanted me to come to meet you and to hang out with you guys, she said, I would say, oh my gosh, I have to be clean for Sunday. I can't go to church high. And she said, and all week I would just brace myself to be clean on Sunday. And she said, and then I would say to myself on Monday, well, if I did it on Sunday, why can't I do it on Monday? And she said, I've been clean for a year now. And she goes to church every Sunday with them. And she's a grandmother, and she's there for her grandkids. Do you see the ripple effect? I didn't even know this. If you asked me her name, I wouldn't even been able to tell you. But she was showing up because she'd been invited. Do you see kind of the ramifications? This is what we need. All the stuff you hear on the news, opioid addiction, and suicide, and all of this stuff is because we're all so broken and so disconnected, and we need this. And so, anyway, just a short story to kind of share, just the impact of something so simple that it can have in a community. Yeah, sorry, I was on a roll.
Ryan, right before we broke, you had started to say something about most marriages end in 50%, and then you said that's not true. So what were you doing with that?
It's a misleading statistic.
So we're saying about everybody says, oh, half of marriages end in divorce. Yes and no. So first-time marriages, it's less than half end in divorce. So remember we said it's 23% at 5 years after the wedding day. From that point on, it kind of plummets. It's a very low chance of divorce, after that. However, we call empty nesters, so when the kids move out and the parents have just been so busy they hardly know each other, kids move out, that's another sort of incident of divorce. But the national statistic basically takes every single divorce, whether that couple has been married 1 time or 5 times, and puts it all in the same pot and says, oh, 50% of marriages end in divorce. It doesn't take into account that many recorded marriages, they don't even really bother to track how many are first time or 5th time. Ryan has an aunt who's been married 6 times now? I don't know, I lost track.
6 times, really sweet lady. Yeah, for 5. So we usually she has 4th of July every year. and they always have a karaoke. One of my cousins has made a career of karaoke. He loves it. Margarita machine rolled out, at the pool. And she was like, the toast, she said, I just wanted to know, the next time I get married, and this is getting ready for marriage number 5 or 6 now, she said, I'm going to do it right. She said, I'm going to do it for the best reason of all. And she said, it's going to be to make me happy. I'm going to get married for the right reason. And I remember, I think she choked on the line. but it was, but awesome, good person. I tell her, if I needed anything, she's there to help. It's just marriage, their experience has been, obviously, definitely, since that half of them pretty much ended divorce.
You see the government, the way they record it. So in our book, and we didn't bring probably nearly enough, but we have a book, How to Help the Next Generation of Marriages Survive and Thrive. And if you want it, just leave your name and email on a piece of paper, and Ryan can, I think they're $15? Yeah. Ryan can send you like an email invoice you can pay online. But we break down all that data in there. Like there are what we call indicators for divorce. So like if your parents were divorced, if you spent too much money on the wedding, if you spent too little on the honeymoon, if you didn't go on a honeymoon, if you had under 200 friends at the wedding. All these things are all indicators for divorce, but it breaks all of that down. So we always tell people, don't tell couples you have a 50% chance of divorce. Tell them these are the indicators for divorce, okay? Because they're already petrified of getting divorced and think, oh, something went wrong. Guess we're one of the 50%, So you don't want them to just throw up the white flag because they will throw it up so easily. So that's why the mentorship is important and why knowing what your indicators are as opposed to throwing out the 50%.
And one more detail about that first 5 years is so important. Many of us have heard of the 7-year itch, right? So they actually are getting the 7-year itch, but they're getting it a couple years earlier because a lot of them are living together for at least 2 years beforehand. So there is something about 7 years into a relationship and a couple of children, I think, that sort of wired. There's some of, a lot of it seems, but if we can get them through that first 5 years and get them to kind of leave that culture of that cohabitating mindset and contraceptive mindset behind and isolation mindsets behind and becoming part of a community, during those first 5 years, that's when you see the indicators of a successful marriage and that start to rise. So.
This is the last slide before we kind of go into the actual training for people who want to stay, and so we're trying to keep things on roll. What time is it?
1:30.
Do we have the time?
1:15.
Perfect. On schedule, trains on time. This slide that we have right here is called the Art of Evangelization. This is a talk we actually gave for 400 priests in New Orleans at a clergy convocation, and it was funny because we were just putting together, we said, well, what are components that if they're missing, you just cannot evangelize? What are they? What are the key things? And we came up with this acronym, the Art of Evangelization. ART stands for Attraction, Relationships, and Trust.
And we had presented to a lot of clergy before, and if you ever presented to clergy, you try to be engaging. I mean, it's, again, statistically, many priests and deacons, seems like a lot of them, they don't have a great array of experiences about marriage prep information. So
neither had we.
We're definitely keeping that in mind and trying to figure out, okay, how do we explain to them in a way that makes sense and engages them.
And nobody wants to go to anything on marriage prep, right? Especially like Father Michael said, I'd rather do 10 funerals than a wedding. So we were trying to figure out how to talk to 400 priests about why they should rather do a wedding than a funeral. And so attraction, relationships, and trust. Attraction. So again, if you remove any one of these 3 things, you'll see how kind of the whole evangelization opportunity falls apart. So attraction. So you or the mentor couple or anyone involved in evangelization, even forget marriage prep, any form of evangelization. If the person that you are trying to introduce to Christ is not attracted to the person who's inviting them, okay, not attracted to their joy, their patience, their empathy, whatever it is, if they are not attracted, they aren't going to say, I want what they have. Remember, the early Christians, you recognize them, see how they love each other. Okay, there was an attraction. Wow, look, I want what they have. Ryan was talking about attachment theory, and these young couples, there's something they see in the mentors that they're attracted to. I love this #1 thing we hear from the guys. They say, We chose the mentor couple because the way they interact with their children. We love the way they treat their children. Those are the things, maybe these young couples, maybe their parents weren't particularly kind, maybe they were disengaged, maybe, they were too busy with work, whatever it is. But they'll say, I want that relationship, that father-son relationship, or I want what I see, so attraction, that we are drawn to really, I think, Ryan says all the time, kind of like the remedy for the wounds that we have.
Maybe it's not like your friends or your spouse and just the people you're attracted to. There's nothing to be ashamed about or uncomfortable with, but I think, there's a complementarity that exists in the relationships that God allows us to be sort of ongoing and life-giving and committed. And it's something that we learn as a part of our enlightenment, our growth, and our healing and insight. And there's nothing wrong with that. And we should be able to trust that, obviously when it's in regards to natural law and it's going in the right direction. But I think it's when we trust those engaged couples to choose and to identify who they want to be a part of this process, this mentor couple is filling in the gap through the attraction, and it's most likely having something to do with a void that was created in this young couple by their parents' marriage or lack of marriage. Something is, and we hear that over and over again, that just is communicated in those months of preparation.
So attraction. So to remember that if you take that out of the process, evangelization is almost impossible, other than God knocking St. Paul off his horse. God doesn't employ that method most often. Normally it's through relationships, right? So attraction, then relationships. Again, in Scripture you see it's somebody invites somebody. How many times in Scripture do you see so-and-so, the friend of so-and-so, or the son of so-and-so, or the brother of so-and-so brought so-and-so to Jesus, right? There are a few times where Jesus says, hey, you, come, but the majority of the time, someone brings someone to Jesus, right? Even if they drop them through the roof, whatever it is, someone brings someone to Jesus. So somebody who has a relationship with Jesus brings someone else to Jesus who did not have a relationship with Jesus. Or maybe they knew who he was, but they didn't know him, okay? And so relationships, something we also discovered early on, this was in Philadelphia before the World Meeting of Families. We had been invited to this sort of pre-synod conversation, and it was about marriage preparation and basically what needs to be talked about at the synod, what needs to be in Amoris Laetitia, what are the conversations that we're not having that we should be having. And it was people from all over the world, and everybody's kind of talking and visiting, and it definitely kind of felt like misfits there, everybody was probably 20 years older than us, and we're saying, I think that the problem is that we have the freight train of church teaching, and we're trying to get it across one of those little, have you ever been on one of those little pedestrian swinging bridges? That's the flimsy relationship we have with young people today. It's that flimsy. Sometimes it's just like one of those zip lines, We're trying to put a freight train over a zip line. It just doesn't work like that. I said, but the church's teaching is still beautiful, and this young couple is still beautiful. The fact that they're not sort of connecting, the problem is we don't have the right bridge. And the right bridge is the bridge where there's a real relationship, where there's real trust, that you just can't get the church teaching today. I think a long time ago, because of the impact of families and sort of the status of the church and all of these things, you trusted the church said, this is the truth, here's the bridge, walk over it, or not a problem. Even a long time ago, maybe the couple could just walk over the bridge and you don't have to worry about the freight train. But here we're pull, trying to get the two together, and it's just not happening. Then the other part of that is trust. So if you don't trust me, you're not going to listen to anything I have to say. Now, you probably trust me a little bit because the Diocese of Manchester said, hey, come give this talk, come listen to this talk. But these young couples, they don't trust the church, they don't trust authority, and we represent all of that. Whereas this mentor couple that they choose, that they're attracted to, that they're in relationship with, they look at them and say, well, they go to church, they like the church, I go to church with them, I guess church is not so bad. They get to know Jesus through the love, as Ryan was saying earlier, the love of this mentor couple. Remember, that's the reason Witness to Love is called Witness to Love, right? The mentor couple is witnessing the love of Christ to this couple who's maybe never experienced that kind of love before. And when they trust the mentor couple, they're going to start to trust you. is trust you, they're going to start to trust the church. The whole witness love process is about building up between those two couples the attraction, the relationship, and the trust. So you might say, well, why do you even need a workbook? You know, just tell them to go to church together and talk about finances and do whatever. You talk about Dr. Peter Martin? No? This Dr. Peter Martin, who Ryan knew from when he went to school at the Institute for Psychological Sciences, his whole doctoral thesis was on the sort of connection between attachment theory and evangelization, and how if you don't trust, good luck. And that's something we just kept saying over and over and over with these couples. If they don't trust, nothing's going to happen. And so for evangelization to take place, if you take any one of those three things out, it may or may not work out. And so in the Witness Love materials, Dr. Peter Martin said to us, he said, you know, virtue is only, it's caught, not taught. And it's only caught in a attached relationship where there's trust. And so he said, the best thing that you can have your couples doing together, because we were just, you know, oh, let's use a little bit of this and a little bit of that. He said, no, what you need to do is, for evangelization, you have to have a firm foundation in virtue. You can't have a firm foundation in virtue if the person working with you, that, you know, if you don't trust them. So he said, what you need is for the two couples to grow in virtue together, because virtue is caught, not taught. He said, that's what you need to do, and build into there opportunities for that attraction to deepen, the relationship to deepen, and the trust to deepen. So all the Witness to Love materials are focused on that. The videos, the workbook, everything is about growing in virtue and showing another person how to live that. So it's very different from like life skills or theology. It's all kind of that attachment theory dynamic kind of woven together, and he helped us put that workbook together. The workbook that you have in the Civil Marriage Initiative is similar to the traditional workbook we have. It is different though, but you'll see some of the dynamic of how they understand the virtues, the stories, the discussion questions, and all that. There are some similarities to the original book. And this quote from Pope Francis was actually from Monday. Did he just say this on Monday? Which I was like, oh, I get news alerts when anybody puts witness to love or witness of love, like in any document anywhere. So I got a Google alert saying, you know, witness of love. And so I clicked on it. I said, what is this? And it said, it is an evangelization that is not proselytism, but first and foremost witness, a witness of love. And that is he was speaking to the International Charismatic Renewal Movement about Pentecost and about evangelization. But truly that's what it is, especially today. There's a famous quote that says, the world doesn't listen to teachers, it listens to witnesses, and the only reason it listens to teachers if they are also first witnesses. That's Pope Paul VI. Yes. So do you see that he said that, you know, decades ago, but it's just as true, if not truer today. People are watching more than they're listening. We might say that kind of as a wrap up. So we've tried to bring you like the total of some of the key things we've learned over the years, and also. It's an ongoing thing. So with Witness Love, you know, with the feedback we get from pastors, the people we work with, you know, it's always growing kind of the resources for evangelization that we have, sort of like the Civil Marriage Initiative. Witness Love is in Spanish, French, and the next one will probably be Vietnamese. That's that one that's starting right now. We're honestly kind of like it's like being on a carousel sometimes. We're like, whoa. But we really enjoy being here with you, and we'll have a little bit of time for questions, and then for those who want to stay and proceed with, you know, kind of finishing the training online, we'll have that about a 30-minute presentation for that. Any questions? Yes?
Well, I have a question. The mentorship is so important, you know, in the process here, but at what point will the mentors or the couples begin to understand really the idea of marriage as covenant? You know, that you have the experiential side of things, but the intellectual part of, you know, when it comes time for them to say, I do, they understand what marriage is really about.
Of course, no, great question.
And so the formation process in Witness to Love in Spanish and English is basically hinges upon 6 meetings, 6 opportunities of sort of accompaniment and engagement that sort of begins after the pastor, priest, or deacon who's marrying them sort of approves of this mentor, and they put a date on the calendar and those types of things. The workbook, which you don't have a copy of it, the regular catechumen approach to marriage prep, not the civil marriage initiative. The first 4 chapters have to do basically is a presentation of the moral virtues, so prudence, justice, temperance, and fortitude. We don't use those terms, but that's what it is. It basically, chapters 1 through 4 are applying the moral virtues, which are the necessary to the platform. And it doesn't, you feel free to open up, you've seen a good example of that if you open up the package with the workbook. And each workbook has a sort of a Likert scale that we developed, which allows them to do virtue assessment. Chapter 5 is great. So
In the
I think-
original.
Pardon me?
In the original.
In the original, in the regular program. Chapter 5 is the theology discussion night. What happens in chapter 5? So the chapter 1 through 4, the first 4 months or first 4 meetings, they engage and mentor couple have gone through each chapter. They watch the video. They have discussions. We have an app that kind of tracks where they're going. You can see what they're doing, which is really unique, and it's a good resource. Chapter 5, though, is a theology discussion night. So before chapter 5 and that 5th meeting, the engaged couple and the mentor couple would have gone to confession. And there's an examination of conscience that's been developed by some key evangelists in the United States, and hopefully they have participated in whatever retreat that you offer, whether it's at your parish or your diocese, however you do it. The chapter 5, the mentor couple has at their home, for the first time, usually ever, the priest or the deacon who's going to be marrying this engaged couple. And it's that night that they have a discussion and they go through the chapter on the vows together and the sacramental nature of matrimony and what it means, and talking about just all that sort of catechesis there with regards to the theology of marriage. And there's bits and pieces in the first 4 chapters, but it really comes home and they address how all the vows and sort of that makes sense there. It's one of the most enjoyable moments of this process, because for the first time ever, this mentor couple is probably having a deacon over at their home or a priest. They're having a real conversation about what their vows, that mentor's vows, has meant over the past 20 years, which is so catechetical and formational for this engaged couple to hear verbalize what it has to mean to be a committed married person in Christian marriage and society. And then, of course, and then he can raise the priest or deacon guides them through the discussion about bringing children into the world and being parents and that whole theology section there. And so that really sort of a peak. And that would have happened probably most likely right after the retreat that they would have gone on, that theology day or wherever it's handled here in New Hampshire. And then the 6th and final chapter is really a chapter that the engaged and mentor couple do together, basically about almost ecclesiology. It's about being a part of the parish. What does it mean to be a part of a Christian community, a network, tithing, supporting the church, and being a part of ministry. They have opportunities where in our process we encourage parishes to present to the engaged couple all the apostolates that are taking place in the parish, and support them and help that couple to discern which apostolate ministry they need to be a part in, whether it's for women, single moms, whether it's a prison ministry, homebound, children, youth, but it's all pushing them into a full and active life in the parish, So that's the spectrum, and we have a lot of great resources that sort of explain the process and how it moves along.
And also to add that, so because I would say every diocese has different expectations of like clergy and couples. So one diocese said, we don't want our clergy to work with couples at all. We don't trust what they're going to say to the couples. They basically said all the clergy are heretics. Like the diocese is managing marriage preparation. I said, you do know the priests are hearing confessions, right? And they were like, oh yeah, well, we can't help what they say there, but we aren't going to let them get involved in marriage prep. And I was like, oh my goodness. They said, so you have to promise us that if in your materials that you don't spell out exactly what Father says at the theology discussion night. You just have some like questions that say, touch on this, touch on that. We're like, oh, okay. So the theology discussion night, if you know what, different things are, if you know theology of the body, you can talk about it, and it's there. If you don't, or your diocese doesn't want you to, you could just say, oh, I wonder what that means, or let's just throw this question out there. But what we did do is, for the clergy who do want the sort of additional formation, we have videos with Father Michael Delcom talking about theology of the body. Like, okay, you're at the theology discussion night. These are the 5 questions that are going to come up. Okay, here's how you talk about them. So that if they're not just reading about it, or they're not being presented it by people they don't know in a different setting, but they can actually receive it from the priest or deacon who's preparing them in layman's terms. So it's all in layman's terms. And Father even gets out his little chalkboard and explains the Trinity and like all of that in a way again that anybody can understand. So one priest called the other day panicking. He's like, I can't get into the app. I can't get into the app. I have a couple coming in. I'm watching the video for the theology discussion. I said, Father, you've done like 20 couples. He goes, I know, but I watch it every time just to be safe. He just said it gets him all, revved up, and he feels like he just has his game together. So he said every time he's on his way to the mentor's home for dinner, he's listening to Father Michael, giving him his pep talk. So we have all the different resources depending on what people need and where they're at. But we want the theology to be there, but we also don't want to put so much in the workbook that if somebody's a little lax or the diocese says we don't want them to touch it, that we're not crossing that boundary. So
just something to add on too is that one of the nicest compliments we've heard about this is that a priest said one time you discovered an early church process of marriage formation where a lot of it's taking place in homes and it's small groups. So Witness Love is designed in a sense that it actually wants them to learn more because where they learn is not by themselves in front of a computer, but they actually learning in a small group of people that they trust, and it's fun. And it's like the guy was saying earlier, I'm learning stuff. This guy grew up in a mobile home and was abused and just barely got through high school. He was playing football, and he now just speaking with the guy earlier saying, I'm learning stuff. But their response is that they want to do more, and that's how they learn more. So we definitely have more than I think that's basically required, but it's definitely it's in there. So and we want to share that material with you, of course.
Question.
Are you guys familiar with what the Diocese of Manchester is planning for the marriage prep? You are?
Some of it. Derek McDonald had kind of shared with us the sort of the vision and the processes, and that Witness Love would be a perfect fit for the processes that they're recommending for the diocese.
I had asked him on the phone about whether there was going to be some sort of mentoring, because that's something that, I love this idea, and this is kind of the thought that we came here with, is what about mentoring? But the only thing we had heard about up till now was that the diocese is going to be planning 4 places within the state to do weekends retreats, or is that the retreat that you're talking about in your?
That's correct. So the retreat that would be offered is the theology day that's referenced in the Witness Love materials.
Okay.
Yes.
And this is how the process works per se, which brings in, and this is online, we can share this with you, but the 8 steps in a lot of dioceses, this fits well into what dioceses and parishes already do, just putting the components in, but you see that the 6th meeting is basically, the 5th meeting is chapter 5 with the priest or deacon, and usually it's before them that does this parish retreat or diocesan retreat. This might not be clear enough.
So this is like a 30-minute presentation for the training, so we probably can't go into all of it.
But it's just
But basically take what the diocese requires or suggests, and we basically fit that into this framework. And so we have a team of people that work with different parishes around the country. So like there's one team that works with east of the Mississippi, one that works with west of the Mississippi, but they'll even pair you up with parishes that maybe use similar resources. Like if you say, well, right now we're using this version of NFP, we're using the Focus, and we're using God's Plan for Joy-Filled Marriage. Help us put the puzzle together, and they'll help you put the puzzle together. So but this does fit within the Diocese of Manchester's puzzle.
Well, what you're doing here needs to be sold, I think, to every pastor in every parish, and I don't see that many people here. That's why I asked you if you had a resource, like, do you have a canned you guys saying these things that we can take back?
Yeah, it's all
to our
online. This,
pastor?
everything we've done, there's online trainings online. There's also, Ryan's gonna show you on the website how you could give this same presentation at your parish that we're giving today, like, in layman's terms. And the videos are all embedded, so the same Prezi that Ryan just used, a similar one is available on our website, and you can say, hey, I went to this, let me just tell you about it a little bit, and all the slides are there. Yes, witnesstolove.org. Yes?
Well, I also imagine, maybe you have experience with this, is that sometimes they'll start out in one parish or two parishes, and then over time
Spread organically, yes. So we've been to dioceses where they mandate witness to love, and everybody's got sour apples. We've been to dioceses where they mandate it, and everybody's just thrilled out of their minds. We've been to dioceses where 5 parishes show up, they do a rock star job, and then it just trickles out over the whole diocese, and then we come back a year later and everybody's there. So, it just depends. We're not fans of mandating things because it's just, again, it breaks down the trust. So, we always even say, when you're talking to engaged couples, don't say this is what you have to do, say this is what you get to do. And it's all about expectations as opposed to like making, mandating things, if that makes sense. Obviously, when push comes to shove, you might have to do some shoving, but to be more inviting, yes.
Just to clarify, for the engaged couple seminar, which is the day-and-a-half experience that they will be invited to participate in, that's going to be the program Joy-Filled Marriage.
Perfect.
And then within the parish formation pieces, like along with Focus, Witness to Love is going to be one of them, but the bishop is not going to mandate that it has to be this one. There will be a couple choices, but this is definitely one of them.
And it's great, those retreats like Joy-Filled Marriage. We're working with dioceses around the U.S. and even retreat centers that have these engaged retreats. The unique thing is that the mentor couple, remember they do everything with engaged couples, so the mentor couple goes to the marriage formation retreat, and it's probably the first time ever that they've had any retreat. They may not have had any really incredible formation if they were married in the 70s or 80s or not, but and when the engaged couple is with that mentor couple on that retreat, and they're growing together, having those conversations, and sometimes you have to talk to retreat centers about how people sleep and those things if it's overnight, but just figure it out and make it work, because that opportunity for them to grow together and learn to have a conversation is remarkable.
And if you are sending them to a diocesan retreat, usually we say, tell your couple, so like if you're St. Joseph Church, say, hey, all St. Joseph Church couples, we want you to sit together, and then you ask in the diocese, hey, can you put a label on a table? We have 4 couples coming, can they sit together? Because again, you're trying to build a community. So the little things like that make all the difference in kind of building up
and
the parish
our
community.
training manual, or leader's guide that you will be able to have access to, or you receive that in the mail, goes through basically all those best practices, so you can kind of read through that and plug those in. And of course, our staff that helps walk with you and assist you during this process. But if you want to.
So what? And then I don't want to keep people past 2. What time is it?
20
20 out? Okay, we can work with 20 out. So this is we call it the Witness to Love rollout process. So,
and this would be the section where we kind of going into how the methodology is used in the parish. So, if you don't have to be held captive by this part if you don't want to, but this is for the next 30 minutes. We'll go through this.
So when we do our traditional Witness to Love training, this is the last part of the training where we basically say, how do you do this in a parish? And you can go online on our website, just witnesslove.org, and go to the parish section and click on Rollout Guide. But step 1 is basically, okay, who at the parish do I need on my team? Identify them. It could be 1 person, it could be 10 people. We basically say for every 10 weddings you have a year, so let's say you have 30 weddings a year, you want to have a trained coordinating couple or individual, just so that you're a parish marriage prep coordinator, and then you want 1 coach couple for every 10 weddings. So that's basically the couple that's going to sit down with the engaged couple and the mentor they choose and have that coaching session that we talk about. You don't want to max out volunteers, and you don't want to have 1 person doing so much that they have to be on staff. Ideally, if it's a volunteer, something more is communicated. So your parish marriage prep coordinator could be on staff if you want. But frankly, the one that's sitting down with engaged couples and their mentors, if they're a volunteer, it speaks volumes to these two couples as opposed to church staff. They're also more likely to do it in their home. If it's church staff, a lot of times they're like, I'm just gonna use my office at church. Again, going into the home is just gonna build more trust. So getting the team together. And then having materials for the couples to look at, and basically everybody on the team to say, okay, what do we have? So we have the info flyers, obviously in English, Spanish, and they're working on it in French. And as you go through this, when you click Mark Complete, it'll just send you to the next section. This one won't do that because Ryan's got it in editing mode, edit mode on the website. Step 3 is having a planning meeting for the team. So, like I was just, a local parish in our diocese was like, hey, can you please come to the rollout, team planning meeting? Like, okay, we're gonna put this in pulpit announcements, bulletin announcements. We've got our materials. Okay, this is our current marriage prep process we have at the parish. When are we gonna like say, okay, all couples moving forward are gonna do X, and what's the retreat? So just a whole like get your stuff together meeting. And our staff helps you with that meeting if you say, okay, this is what we're doing. She'll even share with you like church use guidelines or ideas of what you could put in a packet for the mentors. Like, again, we have literally all of that. But this rollout meeting is for your parish to help figure out, what are we going to do. So the full presentation is not identical to the one Ryan just gave, but right here is the PowerPoint you can use at your parish if you want to present this to your pastor. The Raymond and Becky video we showed is in there. Father Bryce Higginbotham video we showed is in there. The Intro to Witness Love video is in there. Okay, so all of that's in there. And then the Civil Marriage Initiative video is on the Civil Marriage Initiative page, which is witnesslove.org/civil marriage. This presentation we just gave, it's available here in English, in Spanish, and in French. So that it's all there. And so again, that's step 3 under the rollout if you want to use that Prezi. Get the word out. So it's all the resources. So you choose your launch Sunday. A lot of parishes in the beginning, they said, oh, we don't know if we're going to do a launch. We're just going to start using it and go that way. The feedback, though, was parishes that did an official launch had much better feedback. Why? Because it basically in the pulpit announcement, it says, hey, we're going to start doing marriage prep as a community. Everybody needs to get involved. That means any of you who are married sitting in the pews, if you've been married for more than 5 years, guess what? There's a young couple in this parish that might ask you to be their mentors. And just kind of, so that way nobody's surprised. So do it at every Mass. Really just invite the parish to get involved. Then step 5, customize the form. So like we have the Witness Love intake form. We have just sample things that make your process easier at the parish, and they're all put together. Even sample emails, like you met with a couple, okay, here's what you send to them. So it's highlighted in yellow the parts you want to change. It's all of this stuff is all from parish coordinators who said, you need to do X, Y, and Z. Here, this is what we did at our parish. You want to use it? And so that's where all of this came from. There's even, let's see, you might be interested in this. Right here is a Witness to Love cheat sheet that is for the first meeting. So it literally covers what are you going to do with those two couples when you're sitting down with them. What do you talk about? All of that.
All this was designed to keep in mind that how important volunteers are for the life of the parish, but they also need the right tools.
You have to make it easy for
and
them.
it has to be accessible and quick. And I know this looks like a lot of words, but it's it's here in that all
the 3-page document. Even if you just read this, you could probably get this started at your parish. It's all there. There's also a cheat sheet for clergy. It says clergy notes. It's what to say to the couple when they're choosing their mentor. What do you talk about at the theology discussion night? If you're going to meet with them one more time before the wedding, what do you say then? It is all there.
We suggest that sometimes if a priest maybe hasn't done a marriage in a while, or a deacon, that this is sort of our suggestion for best practices on how to really engage these young people in a positive way that actually makes them want to come to Mass. during the marriage prep process instead of just having a checkoff sheet.
A lot of times, for example, a couple, or a parish will call us and say, hey, we have this couple that we're preparing, but Father so-and-so over here, he's gonna do the theology discussion night, is that okay? And we say, yeah, give him the cheat sheet, you know? It's not a big deal. You wanna share with him the link to watch Father Michael and talk about, that's great, you know? If he's doing the wedding, it'd be great for him to do the theology discussion night. Right? Anyway, there's so many different things there. Then step 6 is basically begin meeting with couples. You start meeting with them. Now, the only prelude to all of this is, since this wasn't a full training, you would, can you go all the way back up to, where's the event? Is it under event or is it the form we did? Ryan's gonna look for it. We just redid our website, so I think they moved the, under parish clergy there. Anyway, Ryan's gonna look for it, but there's a form that you can fill out, and basically the, oh no, they're gonna order, never mind, they're gonna get the DIO code.
Okay.
So if you wanna write it down, and can you show them where it's the individual certification?
Yeah, this, let's see.
We just redid our website like in the past month. And had a baby, so I haven't gotten to. All right.
Is anybody confused and lost? Feel free. We were designed to not help people get lost.
So certification training. So under certification training, so witnesslove.org.
So at the top, so if you go shopping and certification training. And just if you want my email address, I can give it to you right now. If there's any questions, it's just Ryan, R-Y-A-N, at witness2love.org. I promise you we will get back with you. Ryan at witness2love.org.
And if you want even faster service,
Courtney.
you know, parish support at witness2love.org. And that's our team that will get back to you. Because we're going to be on the road. But so if you go to Parish Certification Course Individual, and there's a coupon code, you have to write this down, it's DIO55. Instead of it being $135, it's only $55. And you'll get your training materials in the mail, and you'll have immediate access to the online training videos.
Those materials were supposed to have been here today, but that's what was missing. DIO55,
DIO55, no space, all lowercase.
So you would just go to the website here, and you would click details, and add to cart. And then, you know, anybody ever shopped online? Here it's sort of like shopping online. And you would apply your code here, DIO55.
Yeah, and you hit apply, and it'll drop the cart total, and then you
I'm sorry.
You have a lot in your cart.
Yeah.
I think you've been doing samples.
Sometimes the parents ask me, how much is the shipping?
Awesome. So, I mean, really, it is that simple, and I would say go to the rollout page, look at what's there, you know, email our support team, you know, get access to the online. It is really very easy, and honestly, I think this way's easier than being here for 6 hours, and this way you can kind of go back to the parish, process it, absorb it, talk with your team, you know, sort out the details, as opposed to be, wow, that was a lot in one day, you know, because 6 hours is a lot, but the truth is, so we've had 400 parishes that have gone through this. Everybody has the same questions, and that's why we have the resources that we have to make it, you know, easy for everybody. But and we can stick around for questions, but really, this was kind of all we were going to be doing today. But we are here for questions, and we just want to say thank you for being such an awesome audience, and for staying engaged even on a sleepy, rainy day, because he's putting me to sleep.